and implemented new strategies in a very short period to go from respond to thrive, displaying true resilience to beat all the odds. So with that background, I would like to invite Mr. Arvind Mediratta, Chair FICCI Retail and Internal Trade Committee and Managing Director and CEO of Metro Cash and Carry India Private Limited, to deliver the welcome remarks. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you, Rajat. A very warm welcome to all my friends and colleagues from the retail sector, the FMCG industry, and of course the e-commerce sector. And a special welcome on behalf of FICCI to the Secretary, MSME, Honorable Mr. Vidyut Swain. Now, the theme for today's conference is extremely relevant: resilience. And I'm very convinced that to succeed in today's age, one not only needs to be resilient, but agile and quick to seize on potential opportunities. And I would like to share with you what's happening in the retail industry and how it is important for every retailer, whether you are a brick and mortar company or omni-channel or e-commerce, to be resilient and succeed in this new world. I want to just give me a second. I'll just want to share some presentation. Sorry, there's some. Okay, just bear with me for the technical issue. Yeah. So I want to start with one of my favorite quotes, which reads that the future belongs to those who see possibilities before they become obvious. Can you guys see the presentation? And let's look at what's happening in the retail industry. Indian retail industry is one of the fastest growing in the world and is projected to reach $1.3 trillion by fiscal year 26. Retail industry is not just one homogeneous industry. There are three major segments within the retail industry. There is e-commerce, which everybody talks about. And you can see on the left that the share of e-commerce is expected to grow from 6% of the total market in fiscal year 21 to almost double, 11% by fiscal year 26. Modern retail has seen some headwinds and the share will probably remain static. And I have probably some colleagues who will dispute that, but this is what the Bain data seems to suggest. And the traditional trade is also expected to lose some share. But if you look at the food and grocery sector, the FMCG sector that we are discussing today, we will find, and we have seen, the data tells us very clearly that the traditional trade, a lot of people have written off traditional trade, continues to do very well. They have been extremely resilient during the crisis and have gained market share from 87.1% of the market to 88.8% of the market. Modern trade has lost share, and e-commerce, despite all the hype and hoopla, has gained share from 2.6 at the beginning of the pandemic to about 3.2 if you look at the latest April, May, June data. The point I'm trying to make is that anybody, whether you are a traditional retailer or a brick and mortar retailer or e-commerce, you will play well if you will win and do very well if you are resilient and continue to stay relevant with the right proposition. There are four basic themes that are shaping the future of the retail industry in India. The first one is digitalization of the economy. The whole economy has gone digital. You look at banking, financial services, payments, education, shopping, entertainment, ordering of food, booking of tickets, everything has moved online. And this has been a trend which has accelerated and gained momentum in the last few years. The second big shift is formalization of the economy. Here, I would like to say that demonetization and GST have been two seminal events. They have provided a level playing field for all the organized retailers. More and more people, including in the traditional retail sector, have become compliant. And we are seeing that formalization of the economy is gaining more and more momentum, which is also reflected in the GST collections going up month on month. The third big shift is and trend is easy availability of risk capital. Every day you read the papers, there is a new unicorn being created. They're coming out with very innovative and disruptive business models. This is also creating some kind of problem because there are some unicorns which don't care about the profitability. It's all about the top line. And with their predatory pricing, sometimes it's difficult for the traditional retailers to keep pace. I think this is something which is also being considered at the ministry level. to have a level playing field for all the people, whether you are a large company or a small mom and pop shopkeeper. And finally, pandemic. It's a reality. We are all living through it now, and it has shifted. It has accelerated the shift towards digital by at least, I will say, 3 to 4 years. This is also leading to significant shifts in customer consumption and buying behavior, which is not just affecting the retailers and the e-commerce companies, but also all the manufacturers, whether in FMCG space or outside the FMCG space in general merchandise. The first thing that we are seeing is customers increasingly are showing hybrid behavior. They decide when they shop, how they shop, where they shop. Second thing is customers are looking for instant gratification. The days are over when people would wait for weeks for the product to be delivered or the services to be delivered. At one point of time, people were very happy with 24 hours delivery. It was a breakthrough concept. Now people are talking about same day delivery. And later on, I'll share with you, there are some people who are delivering within minutes. So this is leading to evolution of supply chains. Supply chains have to be very, very resilient, very, very agile. The third big shift is retailtainment. Customers want to be engaged across all the shopping touch points, all the buying touch points. The other big piece is people are looking for one-stop shop, whether it's for a product or services. Companies are talking about super apps. The need of the hour is to capture the customer end to end. You need to take care of all their needs, not just for grocery and food shopping, but also for entertainment, also for education, buying of restaurant tickets or restaurant booking, ordering of restaurant meals, booking of flights, booking of hotels, one-stop shop, payment of utility bills. And we're seeing ecosystems evolve in the Indian market. And finally, at the end of the day, the Indian customer continues to be extremely value conscious. So you have to make sure that you run a very efficient and a very tight ship and offer the best value to your customers. Here I would like to share a very interesting quote. It's from Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce. I find it very provocative. He says very aptly, you need to get to the future ahead of your customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive. It's so appropriate, whether you are a retailer, e-commerce company, or FMCG company. What does it mean for the retailers? We all have to be resilient and reinvent our business models continuously to stay relevant. So let's first talk about the first customer need. We talked about customers exhibiting hybrid behavior. So there is a need for phygital shopping. Customers want the best of physical and the digital world. And we have seen the biggest and the mightiest retailers have adapted their business model to cater to this trend. Walmart invested billions of dollars getting into the e-commerce space. Amazon has spent a lot of money trying to get into the brick and mortar space. And we in Metro also have launched an e-commerce platform, even though we are dealing with business customers. And our experience has been that people who show omni-channel behavior are much more loyal and they exhibit a much higher share of wallet compared to online or offline customers. And this is the data that I would like to share with you. You see this Venn diagram. On the left in gray are customers who are shopping only offline. On the right are customers shopping only online. The intersection is customers showing hybrid behavior, what we call omni-channel shopping behavior. You can see their monthly purchase is almost 8.5 times of customers who shop only offline and almost 3 times of customers who shop only online. The second thing is it's the era of agile and efficient supply chains to cater to this need for instantaneous gratification. We have companies like Dunzo, which are talking about delivery of your food and grocery order in 19 minutes. Grofers is talking about 10 minutes delivery in 10 cities. Swiggy has launched Instamart, where they're talking about 15 to 30 minutes of delivery times. The rules are continuously being reset. The bar is being continuously raised in this space. Then we talk about immersive customer experience, whether you are an omni-channel retailer or you are an e-commerce company, you have to engage with your customers. Nika has a platform, and they have a feature called Try It On, where they suggest products to you based on your skin type and your skin color. Similarly, if you look at Lenskart, they have a platform through which you can select the right frame to suit your face type. Cred is a master of gamification. So we have seen a lot of companies now getting into this immersive customer experience space. Let's talk about this ecosystem. You need to be a one-stop shop for the entire shopping needs and actually all the needs of your customers, be it entertainment, ordering of restaurant food, education, etc., etc. And there are companies, big conglomerates who are creating ecosystems. One example I have is from Tata Group, which I'm sure you're familiar with. If you look at their entire ecosystem, it straddles across a marketplace, logistics, loyalty programs, financial services, telecom, entertainment services, health services, food delivery services, analytics, hospitality. That's what the world is moving towards. Increasingly, customers are looking at a one-stop shop for all their product and services needs. And people who understand that will win. People who don't understand that will be left behind, which is why one needs to be extremely resilient. And you can't latch on and cling on to your old models because they are getting disrupted every single day. Finally, it's about pricing and promotions. Indian customers are extremely price sensitive. In Metro, we have seen that customers are very, very sensitive to the extent that if your pricing is higher, even to the second decimal point, they'll go and shop somewhere else. This is also the era of price transparency. So we have launched tools like Price IQ to optimize return on investment, offer customized specific customer specific pricing so that you maximize your revenue at the same time, maximize your bottom line. This is the era where one single pricing, one single approach will not work. One size fits all doesn't work in the new retail industry. So finally, I would like to end this my address on the note that it is not the strongest of the species that will survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. This is a theory of evolution from the famous Charles Darwin and is so relevant even in today's time, more so during the pandemic. Thank you. Over to you, Rajat.
Thank you, Arvind. Really appreciate that and great insights as always, coming from a retailer perspective, talking about what you're seeing. Now, I would like to from my perspective, I would like to invite Mr. B.B. Swain, Secretary, Ministry of Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, to hear your views, sir, on the overall resilience of the industry, what you have seen for the last 18 to 24 months, and your views on how you see the industry going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wahi. I must admit that I have to rush in exactly 3 to 4 minutes. So I'm
Sure.
so sorry about it. So some other time for the views and all. I'll just give my best regards.
Sure, sure, sure.
Mr. Chinoy, Mr. Rajat Wahi, Mr. Arvind Mandirata, all the esteemed delegates who are listening in, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely pleased to be part of the inaugural session of the FICCI's Mesmerize 2021 today. I have gone through the topics and they're very interesting topics to be discussed over the next couple of days. The panelists have a rich experience in their respective fields and the discussion would certainly be something to look forward to. During the past 1.5 years, the world over has witnessed the pandemic associated lockdowns and consequent closure of economic activities. And consequently, the growing role of e-commerce across borders has further got accentuated. The progressive involvement of MSMEs in e-commerce, especially in the recent past, has really grown. We can see an example, a large number of providers registered on GEM today are actually MSCs. A large number of startups have been able to make use of the opportunity by developing consumer-friendly apps and a convenient service delivery mechanism at the doorstep. The significance of MSMEs in the Indian economy is evident from their contribution in terms of various parameters, in particular GDP, employment, and exports. You would also be aware that this ministry took. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
This ministry took an important decision in July of 2021 when we allowed wholesale and retail trading to be part of the MSME paradigm and to have Udyam registration numbers and to avail benefits of priority sector lending. I think this has also brought in certain sectors which were out for 3 to 4 years into the MSME paradigm. In the current times of heightened uncertainty, the question of enabling MSMEs to further carve out a niche for themselves is the challenging next step. Some features which are to be kept in mind are augmented transparency, enhanced efficiency, facilitating the ease with which business can be done, reaping economies of scale, and an efficient price discovery. Overcoming the digital divide while complying with regulations is obviously will always be a very, very big challenge. My best wishes for the success of the summit. At the end of it, I must say I really enjoyed seeing the presentation done by Mr. Mendiratta. It was very educative, and I learned quite a bit, particularly the last one, the Darwin statement, and all, which as a principle, I think all of us believe in. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I'll be taking your leave as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Swin. Thank you. So I just wanted to now invite Mr. Madhusudan Gopalan, Chair FICCI FMCG Committee and CEO and MD, PNG India Subcontinent. Over to you, Madhu.
Thank you, Rajat. Very warm welcome and good afternoon to all the attendees. A very warm welcome to my industry colleagues as well. The topic for Mesmerize this year is resilience, and both Rajat and Arvind have talked about the importance of resilience in the context of the things we live in, especially over the last 18 months. So I thought it would be good to discuss on what would be the impact of each of the 5 pillars of resilience that we will focus on over the next couple of days, and the unique role that FMCG companies and retail companies can play in this new environment. So first, take a look at the 5 pillars of resilience that we called out this time. This focuses squarely on first redefining the channels, and I'll talk a bit about how I see FMCG playing a crucial role in this new environment. Sustainable initiatives, which is no longer a nice to have, but a business imperative. Leveraging innovation in technology, in particular supply chain that is revolutionized with technology, especially over the last year and a half. The critical role that all of us, I think, have to play on enabling Kiranas, and the crucial role Kiranas will continue to play in retail for a long time to come. And last but not the least, how do we stay connected with our organization in this new work environment? Let me first start with the redefining channels. As Arvind pointed out, there has been a change in the landscape. But what's interesting is, while of course we've seen rapid adoption of technology and consumers going more and more online, what that has meant from a consumer experience is consumers want the same service and availability and brand experience, be it they're shopping in an organized modern retail format, or they going and buying grocery online, or they calling up their neighborhood kirana and expecting quick time. What this presents is both a challenge and an opportunity for FMCG companies and brands on how do we provide a seamless and consistent experience for consumers. If they expect their beloved brand that they've been using for years, they expect to see the same brand available in the same pack size that they would like to have, be it in a kirana store close by or an modern retail format or online. This, I think, presents a unique opportunity for both FMCG and retail partners to work collaboratively and partner to offer this seamless experience in this new omni-channel retail environment. Moving on to sustainable initiatives. it's no longer news for us to say that sustainability is the right thing to do. In fact, if somebody came up and said sustainability is not the right thing to do, maybe that will catch some attention. But what's also important to note is while an increasing share of consumers are saying that we will change or impact our purchase decision based on the positive or negative impact on the environment, be it by a brand or by a retail partner. Consumers at the same time are not willing to sacrifice the kind of quality and solution they expect from their brands, neither are they willing to compromise on the value they expect from their brands as well. So the challenge in front of all of us is how do we improve and deliver more sustainable products and solutions to consumers while ensuring we continue to offer value and provide solutions to consumers' problems. The second aspect of sustainability, I believe, requires more attention by all stakeholders, industry, non-governmental organizations, and of course, key government stakeholders, is interventions to improve sustainability needs to be holistic. A well-intentioned intervention in one area should not inadvertently impact sustainability negatively. An example that comes to mind is thickness of plastic in many product areas is a good thing. Increasing thickness increases the chances of recycling and reuse. But at the same time, increasing thickness across all product forms, especially in areas where innovation can reduce the amount of plastic that's being put in the environment, it might not be the best solution for other product forms as well. That's a simple example to make the point that as we look at interventions to improve sustainability, we need to look at every aspect of sustainability and look at holistic impact and not just look at one narrow impact on sustainability. I believe that FMCG, retail, and all stakeholders, of course, led by the Government of India, have a crucial role to partner more closely to move this sustainability agenda forward. The third, of course, is leveraging innovation in technology. And we've seen how technology has revolutionized how each of us have responded over the last 18 months during this pandemic. In particular, in supply chain, I believe we're still scratching the surface on what technology can unleash as opportunities end to end across the supply chain. I welcome the recent initiative that the Government of India has declared on the open network digital commerce. And the initiative on the national logistics policy of looking at a digital freight exchange is another outstanding innovation. The more open networks that we can create to provide equal opportunity to players end to end across the ecosystem and an ability to cut out wastage, to have players transparently connect with each other, I think can revolutionize supply chain in the country. And that could be the next big leap that digital can impact on our overall economy. Fourth, a critical pillar of the resilience theme this year for Mesmerize is enabling Kiranas. As Arvind rightly pointed out, Kiranas are and will continue to be the largest and very important segment for grocery. And we've seen over the last 18 months of how the traditional Kiranas have really come to the rescue in a lot of ways of making brands accessible to consumers at the length and breadth of the country. Kiranas are increasingly being adaptable and flexible in terms of last mile delivery, in terms of digital payments. I can see the change myself where my sabjiwala right opposite my apartment, who for the longest time, despite all my convincing, would not go in for a digital payment solution. Within weeks of the pandemic starting, he had all possible payment aggregators on his app, and I had a plethora of options to transact and pay with him, and for him to have a touchless vegetable delivery at my doorstep. I believe there is a unique opportunity for FMCG players to enable this transformation at a more rapid pace. How can brands be a trusted partner, enabling partner with Kiranas to support them on better offers to consumers, better inventory management, providing options for digital transaction with their consumers. And this will enable Kiranas to compete effectively in this new digital era. Last but not the least, the fifth pillar is the connected employees in the new work environment. Again, there is no one who would disagree that hybrid working is the future. But I think the question we need to ask ourselves is hybrid by itself the solution? Or is the real leapfrog that we as industry can make here is going truly the next step, the final frontier of offering unique, customized solutions that work for every single employee. A cut-paste solution which says 3 days a week you work in office and 2 days at home might be a good start as an hybrid model, but each individual has a unique need. And how can we offer them the maximum flexibility possible for them to bring their best self to work and contribute? And this can also be a big step change on inclusion to make sure different parts of the society, cutting across gender, income levels, geography, are able to participate equally in the workspace. Like many other FMCG companies, P&G has kicked off a pilot which we call as Workways, where the aim is not to just go hybrid, but to truly design a unique, customized solution for every single employee that gives them the flexibility but also allows them to make the maximum possible impact. In conclusion, resilience is no longer something that we can bolt on to our business, but resilience is something that we need to build in to our business strategy and our operating plans for us to succeed in this VUCA environment. Once again, I'm looking forward to the next 2 days of what I'm sure are going to be exciting and thought-provoking discussions around the theme of resilience for this year's FICCI Masterclass. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu, and great job in terms of setting the context for the next 2.5, 3 days. Again, you guys have been some of the, you've been on the forefront of driving the resilience, and this is going to be a word that's going to be quite abused over the next 3 days. But I think it clearly also shows how quickly retail has adapted, or FMCG has adapted over the last year as delivery systems got disrupted, distributors went under, so retail stores got closed, open, factories were shut. So lots of changes, and yet we have fantastic growth coming through by across most companies, strong makeup. So with that, I'll just take 2 minutes to introduce the report. Manpreet, will you be putting up the presentation, and do we do a sort of a virtual launch of the report? I don't know what the process we've identified for that, but Harjeet, are you going to actually put up the report for a virtual launch, or should we just do the presentation?
Hey, do you have the report? We can put it up. You want, I can put it up.
Let's just see. So presentation, Manpreet, you want to just put the presentation up? I'll quickly just summarize it. I think Madhu's anyway pretty much captured most of the essence of the report in terms of the 5 areas we've really focused on. Just a second. Can't see the report, so. Pankaj, is anyone putting that up?
Hey, I'll put it up. Let me know when you can see it, Rajat.
Yeah, Thank you. If you could just go to the, sorry to have you to run this, Harjeet. Apologies for that. So again, what we've looked at here is that what has been very interesting for the what the report really captures is that how the FMCG and retail sectors have gone from respond to recover and thrive at a very, very fast pace. What you're clearly seeing is that they've adapted to the new normal very quickly. Business models and priorities were repicked in record time. At the same time, we also had we also looking at which new products were available to consumers. New product launches were still went ahead with various types of tweakings, and they've also accomplished this by building a very, very flexible distribution system, accelerating the adoption of omni-channel strategies, also driving the looking at opportunities for improving and digitizing the entire supply chain. Like Madhu mentioned, lots of headroom to go there, but clearly that's being done very, very quickly, and focusing on sustainable sort of business practices to whatever is possible to afford to still drive the value. And as we look at that, the report really looks at the 5 areas that Madhu talked about. Harjeet, next slide if you can. We're basically redefining the channels. Channel became a big point. We always had 3 channels in India, but I think clearly the role of channels emerged while Kirana really thrived, but it thrived at the expense of modern retail being shut down. So in a way, I think it was unfair play from a modern trade perspective. Many of the malls and high streets were shut. The kiranas were allowed to open, but then they really took the advantage of growing during that time. Sustainable practices continues to be a big area. I still don't know whether the consumer is still rewarding companies for taking a lot of sustainable practices in India, because sustainable practices come at a price. And to Madhu's point, you have to figure out what is sustainable and which can be delivered at an affordable price. Then leveraging technology. This became a big play. Like I heard from one of the speakers that 2030 came in 2020 in India from a technology perspective, and globally as well. Companies that were slowly adopting technology over the years actually fast forwarded it and said, okay, let's move it now. We need to get it done. We need to get to the end consumer. Finally, the enabling the kiranas. Madhu spoke at length about that. And finally, the last part is the whole piece around connected with employees, connected with the whole ecosystem. And I think what we've, I'm not going to spend time talking about that. I think Madhu's already talked extensively on that. So our report really covers that, and we've sort of tried to see that last year's report was reboot because we thought we were only in it for 3 months, and in 3 months' time, COVID would be over and we would be back to normal. But after 14 months, we are still going through the second wave. Hopefully not going to see a third wave. So we thought that resilience was the theme that we've really seen across the sectors. So thank you for that, and look forward to getting your inputs to, and as well as the report will be available both online and in physical copies. So it'll be available. And Harjeet, with that, I'll hand over to you to do the vote of thanks and the closing remarks, as well as give an overview of the sector from your perspective.
Thanks, Rajat. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I welcome everyone to the 11th edition and actually the second virtual edition of Massmerize 21. So just beginning with the vote of thanks, I'd like to thank Shri B.B. Swain, Secretary, Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, for talking to us about how MSMEs are becoming an important part of the Indian economy and for highlighting the roadmap on how they can become bigger. I'd also like to thank Mr. Madhusudan Gopalan, CEO and MD, PNG. It was quite refreshing to note how you introduced the concept of resilience for the conference and as a competitive advantage. And I think also for highlighting the need for sustainability as well as our roles to really improve on this front. I'd like to thank Mr. Arvind Mediratta, CEO and MD, Metro Cash and Carry. It was interesting to hear how retailers are adapting to these times by offering consumers and customers the convenience they seek. I think what stood out for me is the need to forget the old ways of working, reinvent and evolve with the changing retail landscape is going to be crucial as we go forward. Thanks a lot, Rajat, for moderating the event for us and for bringing alive this wonderful knowledge report, which is very informative. I would recommend everyone read it to understand more about this topic. And overall, I think your remarks regarding the situation of the industry, based on all the experiences that all of you have had within your organizations, have been truly eye-opening. Given everything that is going around the world, this year's theme of resilience for Masswise is extremely apt. Last year, when we were putting this together, it was clearly about rebooting. But what we've learned is that the only way going forward is for us is to be resilient. And if this session is anything to go by, we should see a lot of more informative and enlightening sessions coming our way over the course of the next 3 days. For me personally, I believe resilience is driven by three main ideas. The first one is the idea of adaptation. We're an adaptive species. We will figure out how to live, survive, and grow in every new or next normal that's going to come our way. The second idea is the idea of empathy. Organizations and individuals have undergone upheavals, and moving forward requires us all to put our strongest, collective, and most empathetic foot forward. And the final one is the idea that we are not going back. The world that existed in 2020 is not coming back. 22 is a new world with new challenges and new opportunities. We will need to persist to prevail into a new tomorrow. With these thoughts, we come to an end of the inaugural session. Thank you very much for everyone joining in. We have a brilliant lineup of speakers over the next 3 days. Do join us for these amazing sessions going forward. And for now, let the magic of Massmerize begin. It's time to be resilient and reinvent ourselves in everything that we do. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you, Ajit. Thanks, everyone. Great session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone. Bye, Arjit, Madhu, Rajat, Dilip. See you guys. Bye.
Bye. Good,
Yeah, we are
good
live.
afternoon.
Please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to yet another exciting edition of Masmerize and an even more exciting panel today. So we're here to discuss and exchange our views on a very, very interesting topic. What next for FMCG post the second and possibly the third wave? I'd like to begin the session by welcoming my respected panelists, Mr. Saugata Gupta, Managing Director and CEO, Marico, Mr. Devendra Chawla, Managing Director and CEO, Spencer Retail and Nature's Basket Limited, and Mr. Ullas Kamath, Joint Managing Director, Jyoti Laboratories Limited. Welcome, gentlemen. And the FMCG industry has always been at the heart of the economy. Being one of the most dynamic sectors, we've witnessed significant milestones and changes within the industry, but nothing like what we saw in the last 2 years. Our lives literally took a 360 turn. Now, when I look back with the onset of the pandemic, we noticed massive changes in which businesses had to operate. I think to begin with, the battle was about being qualified as essential or non-essential, whether we could generate passes to go to the market or not, and whether we could get trucks that could move. From there on, the consumer behavior and the trends that we saw was significant changes with higher focus on health, hygiene, nutrition, and online shopping became the most important thing. This list continues to go on. During such an emerging time, it's crucial to proactively discuss the possible challenges and outcomes of a looming third wave, to go beyond the new normal and prepare ourselves to what would be the next normal. So I'm not going to waste any time, and I'm going to deep dive straight in. So we'll start with you, Saugata. As the head of one of the leading FMCG organizations in the country, I have a very fundamental question for you. When the second wave emerged, we were all trying to figure out how badly it would impact us. Sitting here today and looking back, did things pan out the way you'd anticipated, especially in respect to consumer buying patterns and behaviors?
So I think if you look at it, the first wave, I think, caught us much more by surprise because of the lockdown and all the issues which you mentioned. And therefore, I think as far as the availability, logistics, and supply chain was concerned, we were far better prepared. I think this, some of the consumer changes which happened, whether faster adoption of health, far eating at home, things like adoption of digital. And when I say adoption of digital, it's just not buying through e-commerce. You are actually using WhatsApp to buy from the neighborhood kirana or from some of the other organized retail. I think those things I think had already got into place. I think the second wave, there were two aspects of it. The first one, of course, was it impacted people far more, including our own people. The second one was the first wave was concentrated mostly in some of the metros, and the second one is far more widespread. South was not impacted by the first wave. So I think that I think we were better prepared. The consumer or the customer behavior was similar. For example, we saw far lower footfalls in organized retail, rather one more sharper acceleration in e-com. But I think because of the fact that there was no general lockdown, it was a localized lockdown, and most of the BCPs of all the larger players was in place. I think the coping ability was far better. Secondly, I think, and I will not say for us, but most of the organization, I think one thing the fact that putting people first and having and then looking at business or profits, I think also helped. The only difference, I think, is that I must say the second wave, including me, a lot of us was chasing hospital beds, chasing oxygen concentrators, and chasing a lot of other things. But I think because the other stuff in terms of better prepared, and I believe when it came to essentials, if significantly, if you had a non-discretionary portfolio, I think most of the people coped with it much better. Having said that, obviously the discretionary part of the portfolio, anything linked to outdoor consumption, is still recovering, and I think it's now slowly coming back to the pre-COVID normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. I think the first wave, we were only focused on getting operations right, and how that was the key focus. In the second wave, it was fear of life. And you're so right. I think all of us spend so much time chasing hospital beds, importing oxygen concentrators, just trying to ensure safety of our employees. But the one interesting observation I think that you spoke about was how e-commerce really leapfrogged into the future. And it became really big for a lot of our companies. So when you're looking back at it, Saugata, do you think that this rising trend of e-commerce is here to stay long term? Is it going to continue, keep growing at the pace we've seen in the last 2 years? And on the other hand, do you see modern trade bouncing back strongly? Because it was severely impacted last year.
So I think as far as e-commerce is concerned, I must say that the entire growth cycle got compressed. What would have grown in for over a 3-year period, I think it happened over 12 months. Having said that, I think earlier the e-commerce, I think two things for both manufacturers and e-commerce player to ponder about. A lot of growth was substitution growth, which was I buy from a modern organized retail because of the issues in terms of social distancing and having to travel. I'm adopting it from e-commerce. Okay, I think e-commerce has a different role. It's a driver of premiumization. It's a driver of a differentiated assortment, and therefore, if we now see it as a route to driving a different assortment, a different portfolio, then this growth will be maintained. For organizations who are merely seeing it as a one more convenient way of just driving deep discounting and driving offtake, I think this growth potential will not happen. And as far as organized retail is concerned, I think the recovery will happen. It was just because of social distancing, other things. Modern retail has a huge role to play. Again, as I said, especially in driving premiumization, driving penetration of categories. And I think the recovery will happen. We are already seeing this recovery in the last 2-3 months. Obviously, April, May, June was a reset. And I think India's story is about an and growth, because one of the brilliant things that have happened in the last 12 months is a major recovery of the Kirana outlets. And today, I think, I believe each channel has a role to play. And for manufacturers, as long as we know that there are differentiated roles to play, I think we should prevent what I call either concept of channel conflict or cannibalistic sale. If that is done, I think each channel can have a growth potential, and India has immense growth potential. I think we must realize that India, there's a growth story which is there for years and years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, because very clearly, Kirana is going to be and will continue to remain the backbone of the retail landscape. Modern trade is beginning to bounce back. Like you said, we're all seeing the last few months. And e-commerce, while it's still growing very rapidly, that spurt is beginning to tone down a bit. So very detailed analysis, and look forward to hearing a little more on this from DC. And a specific question for you, DC, is that we're hearing so many business models these days. There's physical, digital, phygital, multi-channel, omni-channel. What do you envisage is the preferred business model today, and why?
Thanks, Arjit. And I think this time, like Saugata said, that, and we all have experienced it. Even for us, our online business grew multiple times, and what would have happened in maybe 5 years happened within the last 15 to 18 months, and it precipitated. And even on this models thing, I think, when 10-15 years back I joined the industry from FMCG, people used to ask, oh, is it going to be modern trade or Kirana? And then when e-commerce came 5 years back, the whole conversation in conferences became, oh, it's like e-commerce or modern trade, or will modern trade survive? And I think, and all of us is experiencing in India, I think I think I completely go with what Saugata said. It's not an either or, and it is and. So I think the business model clearly, you have to keep the customer at the center of decision making, and you cannot build a channel and then expect the customer to start using it. Actually, you have to keep the customer at the center, and whether it is digital, multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever names we give it, I think the customer will want a product or a brand, and whenever they want it, wherever they want it, at home, at store, at a certain location, at the time of their choosing, early morning, I think companies and brands have to make it available. Now that's from the customer's point of view. So the business model is really simple. For lack of a, let me use the most acceptable term which we all call, I think it's going to be omni-channel. And worldwide and in India, you see the pure play erstwhile online players are getting into offline, and offline players are ramping up their digital capabilities. And so probably in some time, this terminology itself will vanish of physical or digital, and I think it will be one and only a multi-channel or omni-channel. And that's from the consumer point of view. And if I see from a brand's perspective, all channels may not matter equally, because as Saugata mentioned, and even when I used to work in Coca-Cola, we used to have brand pack channel strategy, which channel is for mass, or which channel is for premiumizing, and which F&B sector. Every channel has a role to play, and especially when you have to manage your gross margins across the channel. So all channels may not matter equally, and that's because each organization have their own capabilities and competencies. And as simple as it sounds, but for legacy companies to ramp up on the other side, digital is as difficult as for a pure play online to run retail stores. But that is the future. But again, I'll go back to the customer's perspective. I think if you go by the studies which we have, you will find customers using all these channels right now, whether they will buy from a hawker or a rediwala sometimes, and it'll be a kirana store. They will use e-commerce, modern retail, they'll call on telephone. Now there's D2C, direct to consumer. And then we've experimented with chatbot, and we continue to take orders on WhatsApp right now in our stores. And I mean, the numbers are still growing. So I think the customer will use whichever channel, and as long as the brand is able to serve them using all these methods, the customer would not leave that brand. Because if the same brand is giving delivery at home, through online, through telephone, through being available at store, I think the customer will stay with you. And it's also very critical to understand that in future there will be, as I mentioned, no pure online and offline customers also. We are doing this on Zoom or digitally. Because of the pandemic we can't meet, but we'll also meet people, and when we can't meet them, we make them a WhatsApp video or any other call. So I think our lives, even before the pandemic, had become omni. We would meet our friends, we would chat with them on WhatsApp groups, and then we would even do a video call using technology. So I think it's taking over our lives in more ways than we realize. And I think we all are customers, and like us, customers also explore multiple things around them. And so for customers, I think each channel will bring a different set of utility, and brands have limited choice in terms of making their own choice. They'll have to be available at every channel, and understand which channel, of course, makes more sense for which brand or which price point. But I will again say in the end that the most important part is not to lose the whole business modeling, except but to keep the customer at the center of the decision making, and then building the business model around, then vice versa. For the sake of saying, since there's pandemic, let's rush and become digital, or rush. I don't think that would really work, Harjeet.
No, and thank you, DC. Hearing you very loud and clearly saying customer at the heart of everything we do, the channels follow. The good thing, I'm just connecting what you said and what Saugata said. As we evolve, gross margins across channels are going to be critical. So some of the deep discounting we've seen, let's say on the e-com front, will have to taper down, because the consumer himself is going to become omni-channel and will want to have similar sort of experiences, even from a pricing perspective as we go forward. But just deep diving, for the sake of giving a name, we call it an omni-channel operating model being the way to go. Now, on this front, like you yourself said, consistency and seamlessness are the keystones of a good omni-channel strategy. So, how do you think technology is going to enable this for business? And what should really be the strategy to adopt these innovations in the existing company culture? Just your thoughts, DC, on it.
Yeah, Harjeet. So absolutely. I think implementing an omni-channel strategy is it's actually about giving an interwoven customer experience across multiple touch points. Today, you see a company like ours, when a customer comes, we have 90% customers' telephone numbers, and we can do data analytics on what they buy at what time, what in the beginning of the month, which large pack or small pack, and what do they buy in the middle of the month. What when the same customer comes online, we stitch the telephone numbers of online, and marry the two and see what are they buying differently online, are they buying differently offline. I think an omni-channel strategy eliminates the silos and helps maintain an interwoven customer experience, which allows and offers a continuous and seamless experience, which actually, and there's no choice for companies or brands, which actually will help optimize and has to for the customer's journey. But what we need to understand, I think several brands are not able to go the full distance because everybody's ramping up capability. And I would say that currently it's not as if everybody is being able to give a world class experience. They would, of course, be falling short, and those capabilities are yet to be developed. And I'll give you a typical example. Imagine in an ideal world, a customer is browsing a social app, let's say Facebook or Instagram, and there's an ad you see, and then you want to buy the product, and you click on the link, and the link, let's say, on a phone takes you to the other app, or opens a page, or on a laptop, opens your browser. But then what opens on the next app when you click on the link? Let's say you were watching a shoe. Will the shoe open, or will the company's website open? Then you have to again search the shoe. You'll be surprised at how much of this is lacking even today. What if the certain shoe size is not available and the customer gets disappointed? And in such a situation, if a customer types, let's say, size 8 and there's no stock available, would there be triggering off of a chatbot or a conversation right there saying, hey, sir or ma'am, you were looking for this, it's not available, but we have a store 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers down the line, and we can reserve a pair for you, or we can deliver it to you today or tomorrow. I mean, no, you see, this is now seamlessness and interconnected experience so that you stay with the customer. Now we all are a long way to go. It sounds very good to say the way I am, and it's not an easy thing, but that's what it will take to give the customer an experience which they would really, really appreciate. And imagine the customer actually ends up buying the shoe either at the store on the way somewhere, or you get it delivered. So now this is not what is exactly happening. And I'll tell you some of the things which are impediments to this is in organizations. There are many teams. There's a sales team which will, in the morning, they'll get an email or they'll get a message and they'll get the sales data for the day in brand, pack, size, channel, or state wise or whichever. Now, at the same time, the marketing people will look at click rates and conversion rate and performance marketing and won't look at sales data. And the sales ops team will not know what is happening on the click rate while the sale is coming in both the teams. So I think what's going to become very important in tomorrow's world is single view of data, as I call SVOD. I personally feel in a lot of organizations, various teams see the data which suits them. And everybody, while the data source is common, but it comes presented in a manner that everybody has a different understanding of the data. So I think the whole organization needs to come and understand the single view of data. And I'm sure all this artificial intelligence, machine learning, all software will bring it together in time. And the second is single view of the customer. If you're a store person, or if you're in, let's say, a salesperson in Saugata's team, and you see sales data at this store, the customers in this area buying this pack size, let's say, of a hair oil, but the somebody else sitting in head office sees an online data only, since they're responsible for online business, and they see a certain pack selling in a certain size. How do you marry? How do you get the same understanding of the customer in the same geography? So I think SVOC is another concept I would like to say, single view of the customer. And unless you get this thing right, while we all are talking, and while, I mean, it sounds very good, organization would struggle to get a single view of who their customer is, to get the understanding. And unless you get that single view of the customer, how would you personalize the communication or content, or how would you even make a recommendation online, offline, omni channel, or ever reach scale? So Harjit, I mean, I can go on and on this one, but I don't want to take a lot of time. So these are some of the thoughts I think which will challenge all of us to make the customer journeys better.
Yes, actually, thank you for that. Now, if you really look at it, we're really at the start or the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that needs to happen. The only thing I want to say that gives me confidence that once we get after something, we'll do it, because the SVOC that you're talking about, for sales organizations and like let's say at Marico, you will have all this evolution for the customer. So I think we've seen this happen in general trade, the understanding of what he buys, how you can influence him to buy more. But this personalization for the end consumer is something that's evolving. But you're right, it's right at the beginning of it, and there's a lot more work to be done. So I'm now going to shift from the top end of the diamond model to the other end of the diamond model, and this one comes to you, Ulas, where the rural population makes up for a significant percentage of our consumers. And with the rise in this whole digital buying, and during the lockdown, their purchase patterns got affected quite a bit. How do you see demand playing out and being fulfilled in rural India from here onwards?
Yeah, thank you. And very, pertinent question. India, 70% of the people live in rural India. And at Jyoti Labs, with my 30 years of experience, our entire Ujala portfolio was built on the rural India, because that's where you need that extra whiteness, extra brightness, and they mean a lot for them. For them, whiteness is truth and honesty and everything. So Ujala is built on rural India. To that extent, we knew that how to manage that during the pandemic. What we did, first thing was to hire 400 people immediately. After the first pandemic, lockdown was declared. Once it is opened, we were open on April 14th because 85% of our business is coming under essentials. So we recruited 400 people across just to appoint the sub-stockists in rural India, because rural was always dependent on a wholesale market, and wholesale market across the country were under lockdown, because government did a very good thing then putting them lockdown for wholesale market, because they didn't want the COVID to go to rural India, because otherwise rural retailers will come somehow, they pick up the stock and they go back to their villages, and again they'll be carrying the COVID. To that extent, it is very good decision by the central government saying that wholesale market can never be opened till they say. It took almost 6 months for them to open up in big areas like the Begum Bazaar or the Sadar Bazaar or the Katra Bazaar or in Tarakpet in Bangalore. Everything was closed. So where do you supply? Because of our network across, we went up to 10,000 village population with our sub-stockists, with the stock, and they were seeing the COVID on the TV, but they did not experience anything. For them, the business was as normal. And that's how in the first quarter, we grew about 4%. Second quarter, it went to 9%. Third quarter, we went by 13%. Just purely, it was rural. Added to that, I have never seen that kind of a liquidity in the rural market starting from May onwards, May 2020 onwards. Money was available through the direct transfers, abundant. And also the government initiative of giving the food grains free till Diwali, that's 2020 Diwali, but now extended till Diwali. The non-food requirement grew up, and FMCG comes first in case there. So to that extent in India, about 60% goes towards the food and 40% towards non-food. And we were able to pick up that, demand very quickly. Third, smaller SKUs. 5 rupee, 10 rupee, 20 rupee pack. All of a sudden, 25% of business went in for 5 rupee, 10 rupee pack across the country. So because we have 27 factories in 17 locations, we were able to produce very quickly and cater to the demand. And as of today, the demand is still on. The growth is much, much more than urban. And my biggest worry is that what happens to this wholesale market? Because now the retailers in the rural India have got the direct supply from the companies, not only us, everybody have gone. Now this wholesale channel, first time they got affected during the demonetization, second time they got affected during the GST regime, and the third time now is the COVID. So there's a big question mark that what happens to the wholesale market going forward. But otherwise, companies who are prepared to cater to the rural India, the smaller SKUs, they got it. And in entirety, the cash and carry, there is no credit in the rural India, which is what I witnessed in the last 20 months.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And in a way, you can see that the positive fallout of this is that companies are being able to reach out more directly to retailers in rural India. And that just means accessibility of a higher number of SKUs, because earlier wholesale would only put through what rotates faster. And this just means that more and more consumers in the country are going to be able to get a much wider range or a wider portfolio to have access to. So thank you. And connected, very similar question, because when we're talking about reach, then the key thing that really impacts that reach is how our supply chain systems have had to evolve. We've seen huge changes in this on a supply chain function, and even digitization beginning to play a big role. So what are you seeing as the future of, let's say, supply chain in the FMCG industry, especially now and moving forward?
Yeah, what you have learned during this lockdown period, including me, is the technology and how technology can help you to manage everything. In the past, our salespeople were about 2,400 in all, and they used to take the order, they used to go to the distributor and get it supplied the same day evening and the next day morning. So generally, they will be in the marketplace till about 3 or 4 and not beyond that, because that they need to go to the distributor and give the order and then get it executed also. During pandemic, we didn't want them to go all over the places because they are also worried. We were balancing between the life and the livelihood. So to that extent, everybody got connected to the system which we have at Salesforce, the automation what we did, and everybody are connected on the mobile phone, and everybody took the order on the mobile phone. I mean, ours is a small company of 2,000 crore, but still we were able to connect all these 2,400 people, and the orders were taken on the mobile phone. And that was completely, loaded onto the system of the distributor, so that our people could be in the marketplace till 6, 7, as long as you want, and no visiting the distributor. There is one big change happened across, wherein the productivity went up, efficiency went up, and you got the data. The second one, the planning in the past used to be on a monthly basis. Now it is real-time planning will happen based on the orders what they take. The system will capture in entirety what is required for the week, what is required for 15 days, and accordingly the factories will produce. So the supply chain has taken a completely now different, I would say that the way how we manage the working capital, the stock, which used to be about 22 days in the past, pre-COVID. Now, during COVID, now our stock at the marketplace is 8 days, between 8 and 10 days. This efficiency has happened because of the technology. And there is no convincing anybody a truck has come or truck has not gone, because everything is now visible. Which truck is moving from which factory to which state and which distributor, it is visible through the technology. To that extent, technology has made our life very simple, very transparent, very clear, and everybody knows what is in it for the next week or next month. So to that extent, management of the working capital to better supply system through the technology has helped us. And all the technology companies, due credit to them, they work to the requirement of every company, and they started delivering from their side. Our technology partners did a fantastic job during the COVID wave 1.
Yeah, thank you. Clearly, the one big, another additional benefit is that lead times have become shorter. The connectivity is become a lot closer. So we're a lot closer. And I think what you're saying is similar to a lot of what we're also witnessing, which is our closing stocks are down significantly. We don't need to carry that stock. And then the end result is consumers are getting much fresher products than they ever got in their lifetime. So I think some positive fallouts. Thank you for sharing that, Ullas. And I'm just going to shift gears, Saugata, back to you. We've seen during this time, the one concept that has really evolved is around leadership. It's now being about being more resilient, being more agile, being more empathetic. Do you think this new way of leadership is giving rise to a permanent change, and this is going to be the way forward for now?
I think absolutely. I think if you really look at it, and I talked about this thing about people first, and whenever I think two things I have noticed. One is ensuring that one of the biggest things we witnessed is if you take care of the people, they have that confidence of actually that I'll be taken care of and giving that extra mile for the organization during these tough times. The second thing is, and that got seen in, I think, most of the corporates in India in terms of the focus they give on vaccination, and not only just vaccination for their own members, but vaccination for the family members. We have extended the entire vaccination to the entire third-party sales force, another this one, and I think that itself shows that corporate India, the question of care. I think the second thing I would talk about is resilience and also agility, and also experimentation. I think the number of risks and which people have taken in terms of wanting to constantly experiment, whether it's supply chain, whether it's the fact that we jumped onto Swiggy, Zomato to distribute. We started off with a brand.com. So I think a lot of experimentation and risk taking has happened. And the last thing I would say, one is of course empathy and agility, and this one is, I believe a permanent change of leadership has happened on the kind of trust and empowerment. To give you an example, I've never visited other than one international location in the last 18 months, and business carries on. I don't need neither the CHRO and the CFO going every 3 months, 6 months. So I think this entire thing of trusting and empowering the last mile, or the down the line, to say that you guys are in charge, it's you take the decisions, it's okay to fail, try different things. I think to me that is another big change is going to happen, and it will create permanent changes in matrix structures, regional roles, and all this. And I think to me this will be the biggest transformation that will happen in terms of leadership. And I think this thing about empathy and grit, I think two things which will actually stand its time. And I believe the other change that will happen in risk management with respect to leadership. To me, earlier we never used to have risk management embedded into your business plans. Today I don't see when somebody talks about a 3-year, 5-year aspiration. I think you have to start breaking it up into 1 year, and you need to constantly have a BCP and a black swan in place. And to me, that's the other change, that you need to be ready today for scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and have black swan embedded into your risk management and your business plan. So I think the new normal is different, and it will never be the same again. Having said that, I think I personally believe for a lot of leaders, what they learned in the last 15 months, they wouldn't have learned in the business as usual scenario for 5 years. It has been a great learning for a lot of leaders.
I strongly believe with you. And when you were talking, I could sense all the evolution that I've personally had during this time. And you're so right. The learnings that we've had in the last 2 years is probably 10 years of learning put together to just be agile. And the thing that resonated with me was we, excuse me, we actually reached a stage where while you can plan long term, you need to have your plan B or plan C ready for every quarter, and you should be comfortable and not get stressed. This whole new way of working, which is things will go wrong. A lockdown may happen, 2 months will get lost. How do we work around it? I think that's the evolution that's beginning to happen. And the leaders will need to evolve to survive and succeed going forward. So thank you. Very, very apt. And moving right from there, from leadership to people, DC, this is something I've been meaning to ask you, because it was relatively easier for us as FMCG companies, but for you had to balance a very fine, a very delicate balance. How did you manage the conflict between serving your customers by being present in stores and your own people who would have higher levels of risk at your stores? So what helped, what didn't, and how are you seeing this as you take it forward also?
Yeah, Harjeet, and I think this is the touchy-feely part of the conversation. I'm glad you asked, because it would absolutely be incomplete for business forever to miss the soft part, despite the hard part of business models and all. So I'll tell you, not a single day from last year March, when the lockdown was announced, our stores shut, not even for 1 day. And out of our teams, roughly of 8,000 people, 7,000 plus work in stores. So can you imagine 7,000 people in our company have been working practically every day? Now it sounds really simple since everybody's got doubly vaccinated and at least there's a cure. But we all know the first couple of months, we just didn't know what's going on. And I'll tell you, on the second day, when the lockdown was announced, if you remember, that was at 8:20 p.m. or 8:30 in the night. And a lot of our staff which works in store, they don't have cars or bikes. They are store staff, right? They take public transport, which got shut the next day. And we all were talking in the night, our teams, and next day that now how to arrange, how to pick up. The buses aren't working. The cars aren't working. The trains were shut in Bombay. We have Nature's Basket business here, and you'll be surprised. People on their own turned up at the store, and they didn't have to. Anybody could have said, "Oh no, we can't turn up. We have a problem. This that. We'll wait for." People turned up. Stores got open on time in the morning, while we all were wondering like how to manage. So I'll tell you, it's a very humbling lesson. Leadership in the pandemic, I always say, this time was at the bottom, which is people who were serving customers are the real leaders. I, of course, went many times to the store, but I cannot claim that I went every single day. I did not. I did go, at least I was making it a point to go once a week, even in those times. But our staff was coming every single day. They they called up. If somebody had a bike, somebody took a ride. We had tied up with Uber to do deliveries. So we did a JV, or a partnership with Uber where we were doing deliveries. They started going at homes and delivering. And I'm talking, in those days, I'm talking deliveries of 30, 40,000 a day people are doing. And that time there was no cure. And I remember after a couple of weeks, I went to a store and asked one of the persons, if you remember, we were asked to, all essential workers were asked to carry passes. And in the beginning, there was a lot of confusion, who'll get a pass. When, in FICCI, we all were talking to a various agency for like how to facilitate these passes. And in the beginning, if you're not carrying, or even if you're carrying an ID and all, a lot of people didn't know why you're out. So one or two people also were at the receiving end and, were like, and despite all challenges, even from whether cops or regulatory, who obviously at that time, why are you going, or, being stopped on the way, people turned up. And I remember asking one of the persons, he walked 7 kilometers because there was no transport, 7 kilometers to reach the store and open the store. And when I met that person, I asked him, "Okay, what was going in your mind? You couldn't have, you could have easily not come. You could have said, we don't have transport. The buses are not working. There's pandemic. It is day one today of the pandemic. There's no clarity. We hadn't sent out emails or called them up." It's so humbling. He said, "Sir, abni serve karenge to kab karenge." So I think the whole leadership lessons only gets summed up from our store staff. And it would absolutely be unfair for leaders sitting in our places to take that credit. Absolutely, I think we've learned from them. We've supported them. We were very lucky in the first wave. It was very smooth sailing. In Of course, a lot of people in our teams did get COVID, even within the store staff. It's but natural. We were getting 60, 70, 80,000 even customers in the stores every single day. And the wave two was a little harsher, but not once did I get a feeling from our staff that we'll have to go and ask of them to do something. I think they've done more than their bit. So I think this one goes to the teams. I think it's a humbling lesson and I'm sure whether you are Saugata or Mr. Kamath, uh, anybody could have said, I can't come, could have made 1,000 reasons why not they can't come. And with all, nobody could have forced people to work in this time. You could really not push people and say, no, you have to come. You wouldn't have the heart to even do it, right?
Absolutely.
You
I think
can't.
they are the
Something
true
goes
heroes.
wrong, it's on you, because so you can't even push. You don't even know whether somebody's making an excuse or somebody doesn't want to come. But it never came to it. People turned up on their own. I mean, so I'll tell you, it's a very, very, this Maslow's X and Y theory, we've grown up reading that, one theory says you're motivated and motivate people, they'll do that. One says, no, you have to push people. I tell you, I've got the answer of my life, at least in the pandemic. People are good. People want to work. People want to make a difference. And people themselves took upon themselves that essentials means that if people won't get food, there was madness in the first 1 week and first 2 weeks. If you remember, online slots were not available. Slots were getting booked. You were getting a date of 4-5 days. People were frantically calling stores on the phone saying, can you deliver? Can you deliver? I think the staff measured up. So frankly, I personally as a CEO didn't have to do much but watch them in awe. And of course, support them. We did our bit. We arranged for cars to pick them up. We did our bit. We increased insurance. We took care of people. We tied up with hospitals. I can go on and say what we did, but I don't think it would be fair to really go there. I think this is a tribute to the staff, and I'm sure all sales team in Marico and with Mr. Kamath would have had similar stories. Will be there with all of us.
Absolutely, DC, and I must say. This is a story across every organization, and the true heroes have been at the front line day in and day out. So salute to each one of them. And when I was hearing you, I can't help but share a little story at what happened with us. With in-home consumption going up, our entire portfolio spreads, syrups, milkshakes started flying off the shelf. We could produce. We had our highest demand ever in our history in those 2 months. And I'm talking the first lockdown. Now our factory is in Mandideep and our people live in Bhopal. Because it's a different district, we couldn't get across. So can you imagine, you have the highest level of demand, but you can't produce. And that's when 15 people moved to the factory. We don't have a place to accommodate. We don't have anything in our factory, which is like accommodation or residence or quarters. For 2 weeks, these guys lived inside the factory and they ran the factory and they ensured we delivered non-stop. So I'm just telling you, there's so many of these humbling stories that make us, and it really tells us what our companies are and what people we have. So clearly, I'm sure that there are awesome stories around the board. Now,
Absolutely.
I know I'm already beginning to get messages that we're running over, but I do want to cover one topic before we close, just to hear your perspective. A very popular topic these days, Saugata, is really this hybrid work model. Everyone's talking about how is it going to evolve. In India, in abroad, many organizations have been planning. How are you looking or planning to do it for your organization? And do you think it's going to be a sustainable way of working for the future?
So I think I'll keep it short. I think we have started somewhere the hybrid work model, and we are putting in place. In fact, 1st October is the time we are completely doing that hybrid work model. Also, we are getting into something called a flexi location model for some roles, because I think there's a lot of holy cows that has been challenged in terms of whether you operate from X and operate from Y. Of course, it depends on certain roles. I believe that this obviously there are certain issues which are there, which is basically about what I call team bonding, culture, cyber security. As long as we cope with that, I think hybrid work model is here to stay, and it will also encourage diversity, different sets of work people, somebody on to move into the employment zone. And I'm pretty certain that we will go into this model of hybrid. Now, different industries, different roles obviously has a much more ease of implementation for hybrid role model. But I think in an FMCG sector, it is possible, and we are moving to that model from 1st October.
Fantastic. And I think we'd really look forward to hearing learnings from there. And I'm sure in the next 3-4 months, this is going to be a core discussion on how this will evolve. But thank you for sharing what you're doing. Mr. Kamath, my last question, and coming to you. When the first wave happened, there was chaos and disruption. When the second wave happened, we were better prepared. Now, if we do have a third wave, do you believe that there will be minimal disruption from a business perspective for our organizations?
Absolutely, yes. I think because of all our employees, like double vaccinated. That confidence is there, not only them, including the distributors or the families and everybody. And the fear is not there. I've been going to the market in the last 1 month. I've seen, and the fear is not there. And what they have faced in the second wave is the biggest example that how they, like as warriors, they come out with big win. And as both Saugata and DC said, that they are the true warriors. And our annual report this time is comes with only their pictures. So to that extent, the third wave will come, but we may not be as harsh as second one, but will be there. But according to me, disruption will not be there at all, because it's better prepared for the worst, and like you are better prepared, like Karnataka, where I'm a part of it. We are already prepared how to manage the third wave. For all it may not come as much as preparation is going on here, but that is what I see. There won't be any. At least in FMCG, I don't think that there will be disruption in the third wave.
Fantastic, and really good to hear this confidence. And I think this is the high note that we look to bring this session to a close. I just want to thank you all for sparing your time, your insightful thoughts and inputs. While we had a short session, I think it was power-packed, and the audience would have definitely learned as some useful observations from your experiences. So I want to thank you once again, and I just want to close by saying that it just proves that the FMCG sector is really the heartbeat of the nation and is driven corely by evolution in consumer and customer behavior. So look forward to reconnecting soon, and thank you for being part of this session today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarjeet. Thanks, Saugata. Thanks, Mr. Khan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye.
We are live now.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. A very good evening, good morning, good afternoon to whichever part of the world you are joining us from today. We are very excited to have you join this session and a very interesting conversation today on digital healthcare and how it can actually improve the quality, affordability, and access of care in India. And we are joined with a very accomplished panel today that is leading the digital health revolution in India from the forefront. We have Mr. Vikram Pagadia joining us from National Health Authority. He's the Joint Director at NHA and leading ecosystem adoption for NDHM. We also have today Mr. Prashant Tandon, who's the CEO and co-founder of 1MG, which is one of India's leading healthcare technology platforms. We have today also Ms. Meena Ghosh joining us. She's the chairman and CEO of Portia, which is India's largest home healthcare provider. We have Deepak Sahni, who's the CEO and co-founder of Healthians, which is bringing in new age diagnostic services to the forefront in the country. And we have Mr. Vidur Mahajan, who's the co-founder of caring.ai, and he is actually in some ways building the Google of healthcare in India with some very innovative AI solutions. So thank you all of you for joining us today. We are very privileged to have a panel like you who's really running the show on the ground day in, day out in terms of using digital to expand access and quality of care in India. We have 45 minutes today, and what we want to talk about fundamentally is how digital in healthcare can improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the physical infrastructure in India, and in some ways negate all the years of underinvestment that's happened in health infrastructure. I want to start off with Mr. Pagadia first. That we all know that the government is doing a lot in terms of building a network of digital public goods that will federate health data. We have all been hearing it for a long time, but the biggest question that everyone has is when is it going to be launched nationally, and how will it be an enabler for the ecosystem? If you can get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. The digital health mission does hold a lot of promise, and it was launched on a pilot basis in 6 union territories last August, on August 15, 2020, and on Monday, that is September 27, it is going to be launched nationally. We do hope that with the advent of digital health mission being rolled out in the entire country, whatever learnings that we have made from the pilot, we'll be able to build upon them, and we can utilize the scale, because the impact of digital health mission would only be seen when everybody starts using it. Yeah.
Got it. And Mr. Bagadia, one more question. Recently NHA released a consultation paper on UHI, which in some ways federates how health services are discovered by citizens. And it's a consultation paper, but there are concerns that many people in the ecosystem have, is that it will disrupt business models and it will create new market dynamics, which favor a certain kind of businesses that have large captive customer bases. How would you want to address that concern of the ecosystem? Does NDHM actually partially benefit only a certain set of stakeholders and leave out the others, or does it create a level playing field?
See, the fact that NHA brought out a consultation paper and very openly, in a very democratic way, it laid down that these are the possible issues that may be there with the framework that has been suggested. And we have received a lot of feedback from Safiki, Nescom, various other tech players about their concerns. We also did an open house about it, and we are still thinking aloud as to how it should be restructured or reframed. But the basic tenet of UHI is like the open protocol and fair price discovery. So these are mainly what I understand from the framework are taking into account the citizen of India. It is irrespective of whether it affects some tech players, it gives more advantage, but it has been built or designed from that citizen's perspective as to how we can help him or her navigate the health space.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so open and sharing that perspective.
Yeah.
I'll maybe move to and ask Prashant. Prashant, you were really started the digital health revolution and the e-pharmacy model and many other health tech models in India. From your perspective, how do you see NDHM being an enabler, and do you see some concerns with market dynamics that it can potentially create and not create a level playing field for some entities?
I think, first of all, NDHM is a big enabler because, one, it is a very clear articulation of the government's intent that digital access to healthcare is the way forward. It is the mode that the government also believes is going to be a key mode for citizens to access healthcare. And that part is very critical because that encourages an entrepreneur who's looking to enter a new space, because being a regulated sector, these signals themselves are very positive in the market. So I think the entire industry has been waiting for and welcoming NDHM as a direction, and interoperability of results, data flows to happen, irrelevant repeat tests not to be done, etc., etc. So much value is there if healthcare ecosystem is digitized more and more, and that value is well understood and appreciated, and that's seeing a formal push from the government now. Having said that, I think the specific paper on UHI has a lot of positives and a few areas where more discussion will be required, and I think it will be an iterative process of I hope it will be an iterative process of industry and government working together to iron out those issues. It's a very, very significant step forward. One does not and should not expect 100% perfect solution on day zero, but I think there's a need to engage deeper with the industry and sort out issues largely around the fact that while the premise or the foundation seems to be like UPI, which is fundamentally okay, but healthcare is not a transaction. It's a service, it's a longer term relationship or a solution. And though there are specific nuances of quality, of life cycle value, of a lot of service oriented aspects that need to be brought in, unlike purely a UPI where a transaction with bank A or bank B is X rupees changing hands. So I think those are nuances. I'm very excited to see it happen, but I do think as an industry and the government, we need to work together to make sure its impact is actually as intended. On the market side, I think there are a few things on the pricing and all, which also I would say needs to go through more detailed stakeholder consultations before anything gets finalized. That would be our expectation.
Got it, Prashant. I'll go back to Mr. Pagadia on this. Is there something that the government and NHA is looking at, and in terms of rolling out on how stakeholders are engaged on some of these points and concerns, and how will the rollout of UHI really take place?
coming to the first question, we do take all the comments that our stakeholders have given very seriously, and in fact, we later realized that we did not have this functionality of counter comments. So we tried to collate all the comments and say one stakeholder may want to know the comment or feedback of another stakeholder, and maybe would want to build upon that or counter that. So we have put everything on the on our web page in the consultation section. We also did an open house, and what we are trying also to do is to reach out to different stakeholders who have given detailed comments. And with COVID now coming down, we are also trying to invite them for a physical meeting or a virtual meeting of whatever that is convenient, to discuss at length as to how we can go about it. So it's one of the good example of public consultation as to how policies can be made, because ultimately objective of uh, uh, like the government is welfare of citizens. So if that is achieved and the stakeholders also raise their concerns which are valid, I think why not we should be able to reframe our policies. When is UHI being rolled out? I think that's a question which honestly I do not have an answer on. We are still finalizing on our RFP, and in the RFP for the MSP that we are giving, and maybe in about 6-7 months we should see it functional. Uh, the first aspect of it. Yeah, the first cut of it, so to speak. Yeah.
Very exciting times indeed, and really this is something which we all are looking forward to, and the kind of benefits it can create. And thank you for running such an open consultation process with all stakeholders. I'll change gears maybe now and go to Deepak, and talk about how digital in healthcare has actually expanded access. Deepak, you made a tremendous impact during the COVID crisis by having diagnostic services available at scale at people's doorsteps. How do you see digital as an enabler in expanding access, and how do you see business models of traditional diagnostic businesses getting disrupted with digital? And what would you like to say on this? You're on mute, Deepak. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks. I think, yes, so there are definitely a lot of disruption going to happen on the models that we have already seen. I think traditionally the models has been largely business to business and brick and mortar, and has always thought about bringing patients to their doorsteps rather than going to their doorsteps or offering convenience. I think since the COVID has hit, people have seen it's not just about the convenience, but it is always about obviously protecting from the infections to really spread up. And there are a lot of other reasons because of which a doorstep service would probably work. And I think this is the reason we think that the disruption is almost happened, and this will continue in the similar fashion. However, while I say that, large players are also changing their models. They are also adopting to all the new models to offer such services. However, digitally, I think that's the way forward in healthcare to access. And I still remember when it was about COVID, a lot of information that you need to gather was impossible to gather during the COVID times in the offline manner. It was only possible digitally. And if you really look at the entire reporting of SRF generation, or probably reporting of COVID numbers, or district level reporting to a town level reporting to everything, was actually possible because you were actually collecting the data digitally. Otherwise, it wasn't. It is an impossible task. This, you probably would have reached to the person maybe the 6th day or 7th day of him giving a COVID rather than reaching in 24 hours. So that's one power of digital that we have already, all of us have seen. And I think if you really look at the accessibility, and I'll just give an example that probably these companies in traditional way have taken around 20 to 30 years to probably reach to about 100 cities in India, versus digital companies, and you talk about anyone here and probably other companies offline, They're probably in the first 5 years of their operations are more than 100 cities, 200 cities, 300 cities. So their access is really, really large. And they've been offering their services on the backing of the digital platforms to such a large audience. And such a large amount of public is able to actually take on these particular facilities. And I don't know, if you really look at, if you ask Prashant, probably the kind of pin codes they might be offering would be tremendous, right? So it is only possible because of the digital this thing. We in the last 5 years has been reached out to around 120 cities now, and while lockdown and COVID in the last 2 years itself, we expanded alone to about 80 odd new cities, and it was only possible because we actually reach out to our customers digitally than opening a brick and mortar center or physically setting up a unit. So the power of digital is really, really huge, and I think wherever we are, it's because of choosing going direct to the consumer, understanding the voice of the consumer, and we are still understanding their need every 2-3 months, so their voice comes directly to us, and that's the reason we are able to adopt to do whatever changes that they're looking at, and immediately react to that and digitally offer that solution. So I think these are all the benefits of being digital out there.
Wonderful, wonderful, Deepak. Thank you for that, and thank you for the impact that you have created with your with Healthians. One question that I wanted to ask is that from a regulatory standpoint, do you see any challenges in the home diagnostic service model? And is there something from a regulatory standpoint that can be eased to make sure that we see this business model expanding a lot more and many more citizens and patients actually benefiting from these services?
Sure. And see, if whenever any new model has always come in, either it's a diagnostic model or a pharmacy model or something, it has always faced challenges. I think primary reason has been a lot of people do not understand the new models initially. At the same time, the regulatory framework is has been defined based on the number of years of experience that they had in a particular way of working. So there is no broader scope defined in these kind of models. And I think the new models in the healthcare have evolved drastically in the last 3 to 4 years, and regulatory framework is not changed since then. So if you really ask me, the need of the hour would be basically an inclusion in a broader way for all of the innovative as well as this disruptive model, not just in the I would say in the taxation framework, in the regulatory framework, in the accreditation framework, in the tendering processes, everywhere when we are defining and creating RFPs and anything, these models has to be really taken in account, because you might have somebody who's probably available in 120 cities and serve that particular need. But if you put a simple tag of saying that the turnover of this particular company should be 250 crores, so a lot of startups who possibly can do it will not be coming in that. So I'm just giving a small example, but there are many things like that where a regulatory has to understand that probably this company is not 10-year old, but they're equally big enough to obviously service the demand. So they are not eliminated from any kind of a small RFPs. Similarly, in these tax structures also, people sitting at that departments need to understand how these new model works, and they should be included there. And I think you need to also issue clarifications time to time regarding inclusion of these models and understanding of these models, so that people sitting at the department level should understand that these are some of the models which have come up, has been helping and has been actually changing the industry, and broadly they are included in their scopes. So I think there is definitely a huge requirement of regulatory help which is required to adopt new models, and there are multiple of such required in the diagnostic space as well.
Thanks, Deepak, for that. Uh, I'll go to Meena maybe. And Meena, we all keep talking about digital, but just talking about digital in healthcare doesn't do justice to the whole ecosystem, because ultimately the delivery of care is a physical interaction. And how do you see traditional providers responding to this new digital health ecosystem that is getting created, in terms of they altering their business models? And how do you see also the home healthcare business model evolving with digital as an enabler?
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. So as we've seen in the last about 18 months, the home healthcare industry has played a fairly important role in managing the size and the shape of the pandemic. In the first wave, we spent a lot of effort in doing the remote monitoring of patients who were home isolated and needed to be monitored, such that only those that were getting worse, those who needed a referral into hospital were taken into hospital. And I think that truly helped in managing the capacity of the hospitals so that the hospitals could focus primarily on the ones that were more sick. Now, what is it that was at play here? To do this, you needed telecom and technology and some level of teleconsultations. A combination of these three things is what helped in managing those patients at home. So this was a clear case of remote monitoring with technology, with digital health. But the last piece was those that needed referral and those that needed to be moved into a hospital. That was the second piece. But if you fast forward to the wave 2, a lot of care actually happened at home. I mean, remote monitoring continued to be there, but because the intensity of the wave was so high and we know what happened about the availability of beds and oxygen and so on, a lot of patients had actually had to be monitored and managed at home. The treatment was actually carried out at home. So here, a combination of both digital monitoring for those that were just maybe not too sick, they were mild or moderate, but even the little more severe patients who needed oxygen therapy treatment had to be done at home. So here the two came together to actually manage whatever needed to be done. That was just managing the COVID patients. But think about all the patients who were not suffering from COVID, who had chronic diseases or perhaps were going through treatment for diseases like cancer or needed dialysis or various other things which could not be postponed because they were sick, they needed those treatment, could not be postponed, could not go to a hospital. Here, this again combination of technology with the teleconsultations of doctors coming in, digital health, care at home, supported by pharmacy being delivered at home, etc. So it was a really good example of what was required in the ecosystem. All the different pieces actually fell into place, and it was a good showcase of how a healthcare ecosystem like India could do with all the different pieces falling into place. There were some missing pieces, and while there were how the home healthcare industry is trying to come in and talk about those pieces and do some of the things, this was a real case in point of it taking center stage. Now, what that has indicated perhaps, and for us to look at for both from a regulatory perspective and also from defining what the requirements of the home healthcare industry are in terms of clarity on that this is to be treated as healthcare, the GST regulations has to be appropriate, clinical establishment, the kind of skilling and credentialing, how do you give credibility to this? Because there are a lot of non-regulated providers also, and there are people in the more corporate kind of providers who are making sure that all the regulations and all the credentialings are being done. How do you differentiate between the two? How do you create enough skill pool of people who are ready for home care? It's not just they are trained nurses, but they're trained for nursing at home. They're trained for providing supportive care at home. So those are things that I think there is a lot of work that needs to happen to make sure that this industry can truly support the healthcare requirements of this country, because clearly you can't have just a model of a provider and a facility-based model. So that was to answer one part of the question. But if you look at the second part of your question, how are providers looking at digital healthcare, not just the home healthcare provider, but the facility-based providers, everybody now realizes that the patient journey is not just in a hospital, not just in a clinic. Yeah. The patient journey is end-to-end. The patient journey is when they want to discover, they want to consult the patient, then they perhaps come into the hospital for some treatment or for an intervention. And then there is a post-care, which also probably needs to be done remotely, needs to be done through digital, needs to be done at home, needs to be done at community. So there is a lot more of interest in working on the entire journey of a patient end-to-end, building in all these different blocks of digital as well as care at home, care in community, and care at a facility.
Understood. Understood. I think that's a very important point that you say, that, you know, having the entire care continuum from a patient standpoint is very important, and that entire care continuum can't happen at one location. It needs to happen at multiple locations. Digital is a great enabler, and then home healthcare adds to that physical facility interaction that patients have. Got it. Thank you, Meena. I'll come back to you a little later as well to ask some questions because regarding regulation. But let me just go to Vidur first. I think, Vidur, you're doing some of the most exciting works in terms of using AI to improve clinical decision making with some of the diagnostic data that you have today. I have two questions for you. One, how do you see NDHM specifically being an enabler for that? And second is, what kind of standards are required? You know, how do you create machine readability in health records that can support with clinical decision support systems?
No, thanks, Nikhil, for the question, and also thank you for including me in the panel. I think, you know, NDHM is possibly the most exciting thing to happen to the world of data science in India ever, right? And this is simply because you cannot do any kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, image processing, natural language processing, what have you, without data, right? And NDHM is that at least, you know, is that dream of incentivizing digitization of health records across the care continuum, as we've just been speaking, right? So it's certainly very, very exciting. And the whole idea of digital identities, health identities at individual level that allows you to get access to longitudinal data is just you know, something that is so exciting, because, you know, if you look at the way things are right now, maybe it's only the insurance companies that have that kind of data, and that is very, very billing oriented data, right? The intent of that data is not improved clinical outcomes, it's not population health management. It is very much to figure out, you know, do I give 100 rupees or 105 or 95, right? So whereas NDHM, at least, you know, what I've seen of it, I'm very active on some of the, you know, the committees around diagnostics. The intent is, it has nothing to do with billing, right? Intent is purely clinical, at least from our perspective. And that will allow you to, you know, get access to data sets because, you know, data scientists are all data hungry. So it will give you access to data sets where, you know, you might have 5 years worth of mammography scans for a woman that does not have breast cancer, and then you have the 6th year where the breast cancer develops. So, and if you have, you know, 50,000 such data sets, you are able to create an AI algorithm that can predict when somebody is going to get cancer, right? And what can be more powerful than that? So this is, you know, just a very, very minute example of what is possible using, you know, once NDHM becomes all pervasive. And as far as your question on standards goes, you know, that is a constant topic of debate, like any WhatsApp group, any forum, you know, anywhere you go, there's this, you know, should we do SNOMED CT? Should we do LOINC? Should we do, you know, should we come up with a new set of standards? My personal view is, obviously we need standards, right? There is no way there will not be standards. But also at the same time, you look at some of the language models, the language-based AI models that are coming up. You know, I'm sure we've all seen some forward or the other related to GPT-3 and you know, BERT, and, you know, these basically language generation systems and language reading systems. Maybe in 5 years we don't need standards, right? Because at the end of the day, as a human, when you read a case summary, you're able to figure out what it is, right? If Nikhil reads a case summary and Vidur reads a case summary, there's 99% probability that we understand the same context from it, right? Even if it's two differently written case summaries. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to once again leapfrog the whole standards thing, right? India has this kind of leapfrogging, like we all talk about it all the time, right? Leapfrogging mentality. Maybe as we continue to fight whether it should be LOINC or what should be the standard, someone comes along and creates these summarization tools that can truly just give you the context of a clinical note, or of a report or a diagnostic report, rather than us having to change IT systems across hundreds of thousands of deployments. Of course, there is one cool step that NDHM has taken, which is or NHA has taken in that regard, is of starting up with CGHS and ECHS integration, if I may say, because that is then a clear-cut incentive for at least the private sector to start adopting those standards, howsoever granular they may or may not be. So at least that's a push, and it forces people like us to revamp our IT systems, and hopefully NDHM 15 years from today we'll all be enjoying the benefits of it. So I'm certainly very excited personally about it.
Very interesting perspective, Vidur, having from having 10 different standards to choose from, to saying that we don't really need standards.
Maybe.
Very interesting. I do, we have 10 minutes left. I do want to go back to Vikram with a few questions. One is, we saw how Meena and Deepak talk about how home diagnostics and home healthcare is critical from a care continuum perspective. NHA is also one of the largest insurers in the country. Do we see that some of this getting becoming mainstream, home healthcare becoming mainstream and being part of coverage in the government insurance schemes? That is one. And I want to then also ask you a question around what Vidur mentioned on data standards and privacy, if you allow me to. But we'll first start with the with home healthcare potentially being part of payer provisioning.
Yeah, I mean, with the COVID wave, the impact of home care, delivery care has been seen, but I am not sure whether we at like NHA or in the PMJAY section, this has been formally institutionalized. I am still not sure whether it is being thought of, but but yeah, I mean, it can be thought of. Basically, the point also is like, as Meena ma'am was mentioning, that it is India, so we also have to have checks and balance. So making a foolproof policy so that we do not have pilferage in this home diagnostics would be a challenge, and if we can do that, then why not? Particularly this geriatric care could be an area where home diagnostics can be taken. I mean, to start with.
Got it, Vikram. Thank you. The other question is also, which is more closer to what you do as part of NDHM ecosystem adoption, is on data standards and data privacy. Vidur talked about longitudinal health records getting created. There is also a concern around data privacy. How will that get managed? And B, if you can give us some insights into, how is NDHM thinking about data standards? What data standards for labs, diagnostics, for drugs, for different other stakeholders and entities are you thinking of as part of NDHM?
Yeah. So in relation to like the privacy aspects, we do feel that it is a very critical area, and the standard phrases like privacy by design, federated architecture, consent framework, anonymization, all these techniques we are using to make this program or make this mission really comply to high data privacy and safety standards. So we are making sure that we are not storing, NHA is not storing any data is transferred from the place where it is created, the federated architecture. So it is stored only where it is created. We also have put in place health data management policy in our on our own, because the PDP bill is still pending to be passed. So we are also trying to revise the health data management policy and making it more more foolproof. In relation to data standards, you are right. Like in SNOMED, we did get a letter from the Ministry of Health that India has to pay about 30 crore rupees for SNOMED, confirming to SNOMED city standards, and how is it utilized, and can we get away with that? So the response that NHA wrote that we do need these standards, and because standards, as Bidur rightly mentioned, that they are helpful in specifying what is to be specifying a given standard, and it also make reports in. It also enables interoperability. If everything is in the same standard, then it gives interoperability. We are like. For health standards, as I understand that we do not have any inclination towards one standard like SNOMED City or HIPAA or Loing, but yes, we are trying to make sure that whatever health records that are created, they have health standards. They do have these records are compliant to health standards, but we know that in a country like India, not all records can be fully compliant with health standards. So we are also having unstructured data, or also having the facility of people clicking their photos of the prescriptions and putting it on their PHR app. So if we make the program very, very restrictive, I don't think it will be good. So this is how it is being done.
Got it, Vikram. This is very exciting and also encouraging that it's not going to be restrictive, that one needs to follow a certain standard to be able to participate as part of this overall NDHM ecosystem. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
just one more point would be that because the challenge also is to motivate the doctors in government hospitals to write on laptops. I mean,
right.
we don't see that happening very easily.
Got it. Okay, so I think maybe we're at the last 5 minutes, and this is one question which we typically ask towards the end. You know, if there is one wish list that you had in your individual industry type, and a request or an ask from the government, what would it be? I will go around the room and I'll start with Prashant. Maybe, you know, be it on NDHM, be it on data standards, be it on certain regulations on e-pharmacies. If there was one thing that you wanted the government to do to make ease of doing business in digital healthcare better for you, what would that be? And I'll then go to Meena, and then to Deepak, and then to Vidur.
I think in general, work with us, the industry and government, I think we have common goals in improving access and affordability of healthcare. And I think the new models that are coming, engagement actively is very important. And if I were to make very specific asks relevant to the e-pharmacy side of things, I think the draft rules for e-pharmacy have been pending for quite a few years now. And we need, the industry benefits from as much clarity as possible. Similarly, with respect to diagnostics and telemedicine guidelines, there are a bunch of clarifications or suggestions the industry has put forward. I think a quick time-based response mechanism is which lays out the mechanics in a very clear and deliberate manner. That's all we need.
Got it. So working along with the government, we have same aligned goals, and a lot has been pending for a while. It will be great if there is movement on it. Thanks, Prashant. Meena, we of course touched upon the PMJY insurance inclusion, but is there anything from a home healthcare standpoint that what has gotten started in COVID can really then become a mainstream option for healthcare delivery in the country?
So I think Vikram did touch upon that, is that even though the home healthcare industry played an important role, it doesn't seem to be in the minds of people to engage this industry to see how we can help going forward also. Because our role is not just during pandemic, our role is, like Vikram rightly said, in helping manage elder care, chronic diseases, post of hospitalization. There's a lot of treatment, there's a lot of rehabilitation and continuum of care that is required. Now, of course, there is a concern about is this being delivered as per certain standards, by credentialed people, by approved people, and that's exactly what we are suggesting, that we enter into a dialogue. We'd love to come and talk about how we can bring a certain degree of credibility to what is going on the ground, so that it can become part of the overall ecosystem in a more formal way. That would be the request that I would place on behalf of the industry.
Got it, Meena. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Deepak, to you, I know you spoke about a bit in terms of home diagnostic, but anything else in this part of the wish list from a standards perspective or any other dimension?
I think, yeah, Prashant has already added about the guidelines across telemedicine and diagnostics, but I will add probably in terms of if you really look at if home care and diagnostics can be an inclusion in a healthcare services. Because today we define this as an online model sometimes, and somebody calls it as a new model and somebody calls it as an aggregation, but it is not defined as a healthcare model or a healthcare service. So defining home care or diagnostic into, or online diagnostics into a healthcare service will help in actually clarifying a lot of definitions that has been given in different laws, that where does this services lies in the entire ecosystem. Because if you don't define it and you just put that as to be a new service, then these are nowhere. When you define it as healthcare service, then it is automatically included. So again, putting the point forward, including us into a healthcare services, because it's a similar service but done in a different way, would be really helpful.
Got it, Deepak. Thanks. Vidur, to you, anything?
Yeah, so when wish list is always that there should be guidelines around data sharing. I think that is one thing that we are very apprehensive to even talk about. And one consequence of not having such clarity is that you have machine learning engineers in every engineering college in India trying to build a chest X-ray automatic diagnosis system using data from the US, right? And then and it just it's like 1,000 needles through the heart, right? Like we have all this data, we just can't, we don't have the safety net to be able to open source it, to share it. So I myself am part of a couple of committees where we're trying to figure this out, but yeah, maybe we need to do a better job, faster job.
Very interesting. I hope some of the aspects in PDP, health data management, and the consent language that NDHM is creating on anonymized aggregated data may support that. But thank you for sharing that. Vikram, anything as closing thoughts, as reactions before I just close it all? We're almost at the top of the hour.
I have been in NHA for only 3 or 4 months. So and I am from income tax, so mostly industry is always seen as an adversary. But in sessions like this and at NHA, I have myself understand and appreciated, and trying to appreciate the collaborative way in which we can do citizen welfare together. So it was thank you for inviting me to this session. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Also, thank you, Vikram, for joining us for this session today at such a short notice, and thank you for all the other panelists for joining us. It was a very interesting discussion, and I think one key takeaway definitely is that if both public and private sector come together, some of the hardest problems in healthcare can actually be solved together versus being adversaries. And I think that's really the underlying theme of the entire discussion that we had today, and very exciting times ahead for all of us with NDHM rollout, as Vikram shared with us in the call today, planned for this Monday by the Prime Minister at 11 o'clock. So very, very exciting times with NDHM coming in and the overall digital health revolution just getting started. So look forward to it, and I hope we will look back at these discussions and say that, you know, this was the time when we spoke about some very basic things, and now India really is at the forefront of healthcare globally. So thank you for joining in, and it was lovely talking to all of you, and hope to continue engaging on these conversations in future forums as well. All right. Have
Thank
a nice
you. Enjoyed the session very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Bye. Thanks, Vikram, for joining in. And apologies if we put you on. Yeah.
No apologies. I'm thank you for asking.
They're still streaming.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe, yeah. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Seems like we're live. So good afternoon, everyone, or rather good evening. I think I'm very privileged and delighted to have an excellent panel with us to discuss an extremely interesting and topical topic in some senses. As perhaps all of us have personally experienced and are actually living, the journey, which is once in a lifetime shift in the entire retail and branded sales ecosystem. This is a global trend, not just India, and there are new business models, ecosystems that are evolving, and an overwhelming shift towards omni-channel retail. This is largely fueled by change in consumer behavior enabled by technology. Rapid digitization has actually changed customer expectations quite dramatically. Digital technologies, not just for the consumers, but also for the retailers, the data that's available to brands for decision making, all of that has changed at a pace which is actually not seen before. Therefore, in that context of the omni-channel revolution, which has only been made faster by COVID in the last few years, it's really a topic that I expect to learn a lot from this very distinguished panel. So thank you, gentlemen, for making the time today. So over the next 45 minutes, I think we will cover a fair bit of a couple of dimensions on omni-channel. Really, what does it mean? What does it mean in terms of the nature of relationship with the consumers? What are the operational implications of omni-channel? How do we think about consumer experience in an omni-channel world? And challenges and learnings from the leaders who have actually gone through the journey and shaping the omni-channel sort of ecosystem as we stand today. So thank you. We have on the panel 3 panelists already, and the 4th panelist will join soon. So I'd like to welcome Ambarish. He's co-founder and CEO of Pepperfry, a brand that most of us would have interacted with, if not purchased from. Deepak, who's the MD at Tupperware. Many of us would have grown, using the products from Tupperware. And Anurag, co-founder and CEO of Shopmatic, an extremely interesting concept, Anurag, and we'd love to know more about it as we speak. So welcome. We'll also have Seema Ved joining us in a few minutes. She's the founder and chairwoman of the apparel group. So with that, maybe we'll get started. Deepak, first with you. Really to start with, would be great if you could actually define omni-channel. This term has been used and talked about quite often, but what does it really mean? And from the different lenses, as a brand owner, as a retailer, as a consumer. So it would be great if you could actually peel the onion on omni-channel and get our discussion started.
Sure, Ravi. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. So I think omni-channel is one of the most misunderstood word. People confuse between multi-channel and omni-channel. So I would like to spend a minute on that. So multi-channel is when you have various channels through which the consumer can interact with you. But when you integrate all these channels, all the multi-channels integrated, that is when it becomes omni-channel. So that's the larger difference. Now, what does it actually mean for the brand, for a consumer, and probably for the retailer? So for the brand, it actually means a single view of consumer and single view of inventory. In a very, very simple language. For a consumer, it is like a seamless way to interact with a brand from wherever they shop. Yeah, so it's not only shop, there is after sale, there is return, there is exchange, everything what they can do seamlessly across the multi-channels. For a retailer, yeah, it becomes a bit constrained because they have a physical place. For a brand, of course, they have various channels. But now that is where the larger innovation is happening, Ravi, especially induced by the pandemic. So when the stores are closed or even when they are open, people are, footfall is very low. So now you actually have to think about omni-channel from one single channel, how you can make it omni. So you'll have to look, how do you serve? So for a retailer, it boils down to how do you serve from one single channel. So if I have to elaborate that for a retailer, previously it used to be when the consumer is walking in, you give them the service and they interact with the brand, get demonstration done, try if it is that if that product category, and pay and buy, an instant gratification. But now I think it is much beyond, because the walk-ins are in scarcity today as we talk. But the consumers are there. They need the consumption is there. It's not the consumption has gone down. In fact, many categories. If I speak about the category which we deal in, our consumption has gone up by 40% because everybody is cooking at home. Yeah. So how do you fulfill that? So I think it is beyond only the footfall. It is like, how can I serve the consumer sitting at home? How can I serve the consumer virtually? How can I give the consumer a facility of demonstration at home? How can I have, we call it kitchen service. That's something like, you don't want to come, no problem at all. You just give us a call. We'll have somebody who's double vaccinated with protocol. They'll come home, they'll check your kitchen, they will give you a customized solution, and then we'll deliver home. So for a retailer, I think a lot of innovation is required. Most of the brands have moved to social selling. They've moved to WhatsApp commerce, wherein the interaction is happening over WhatsApp, transaction is getting closed over WhatsApp, and then people like Swiggy, Genie, and Dunzo are delivering home. So I think the future is omnichannel even for retail, and these are few options, Ravi. What we have seen, if I have to give some example from my brand itself, my store's productivity last month was better than pre-COVID. And 60% of the business didn't come from the footfalls. 60% of the business was we served consumer beyond they coming to my store. So is the power of omnichannel.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I mean, those points are quite solid, Deepak, and sort of without any insight, it sort of makes our case as well quite clear, because it's essentially what for us the omnichannel, the way we look at it is. I like to define it in 3 A's and 5 O's, right? So there's anywhere, anytime, any channel. And it's one catalog, one inventory, one customer view, one promotion, one loyalty view. So essentially from a buyer perspective, they want to interact with you as a brand from any channel, essentially, whichever they are at that point in time. If they're sitting in the car, they're locked in, they want to be surfing the social media platforms, they want to be able to access your brand. They want to be able to look at web store, browse through. They want to go to a marketplace to be able to buy from there. So that any channel perspective becomes significantly important. And for the brand to connect at the back end on a one single inventory view obviously becomes key from that standpoint to be able to harness that. The second thing, as I sort of alluded to as well, Deepak, is that the shop has become 24/7 now by virtue of the multiple channels that they have. So it's you want to be able to access the consumer at any point in time, and hence that sort of drives that. They may want to touch and feel at some points in time, but essentially once they've touched and felt it, they probably might say, okay, I might get a better option at some other location, some other store, some other channel, and then they sort of work through that from that perspective. So, I mean, that's sort of the way we look at absolutely conversational commerce, social commerce, marketplaces, web store, especially the retail storefronts as well. Obviously augment that whole overall omni-channel view, and at the back end, one inventory view, one catalog, one customer view augments that. So that obviously leads to higher same store sales, as you probably might have seen as well, and that's what we've seen with some of the brands that we've enabled as well. So
my 2 cents, I guess, Ravi, would be that omni-channel is anything that makes the consumer's life easier, and it's anything that stretches a brand. Yeah. Add to that the fact that omni-channel prevents brands from playing God. It's the same customer who could be on a mobile phone, a laptop, or walking in a mall at some point in time, and I don't think brands get to choose how they want to engage with the customer. So omni-channel is something that prevents brands from playing God and stretches them, and it makes the life of the consumer easier.
Very interesting perspectives, actually. Thanks, Deepak, Amrish. In fact, the point about consumer always had choice. As a brand owner, you were always at the mercy of the consumer. But now, the number of touch points that the consumer has to make choices, and therefore, the number of, let's say, drop points have also gone up in such senses, right? So the more touch points you cover, the greater the relationship of the brand. And I think, Anurag, your acronym is very memorable. I will use it in the future. And Deepak, I think my takeaway from your answer was that the variables that are changing are multiple at the same time, right? So there are, it's really how do you make all of them come together to actually, as a brand, serve in the new environment in some senses, right? So actually that gets me to the next question, maybe Ambrish, to start with, to you. How has the nature of a relationship of a brand, changed with the consumer? So there was a relationship that every brand had with the consumer. There was an association that the consumers used to have with the brand based on the touch points that they were experiencing the brands in. But now those have exploded. The channels have changed and are changing. So really, so the nature of relationship has changed. But how do we actually make it more tangible? How does one measure what has changed? And how do we measure, are we on the right track? So what would be the kind of metrics that you think would be able to express the nature of relationship and how that has changed?
Okay, let me do this on the fly. I love the acronyms that Anurag was throwing. So let me give you 3 I's. Increase, increase, increase. And I think that's the fundamental thing that happens. And I'm sorry, I'm being lazy. So I've created an acronym which just solves it at one word. But here's how I think about it, right? Omni-channel is supposed to improve things for consumers. It's supposed to increase stuff for a business, right? So let me give you our example. Folks who walk into, so almost 100% of our journeys begin online, right? So Pepperfry is the starting point for customer journeys when it comes to furniture. And so therefore, they normally type www.pepperfry.com and they get onto us, and that's how the journey of the consumer begins. After which, whenever a consumer experiences us in an omni-channel manner, we've seen, and this is what we track, we've seen increases in average order values. So our consumer who's also visiting a Pepperfry studio would typically buy 2.5 times more than a consumer who's just buying online, right? So there's an increase in average order values. That's something that all omni-channel should drive. The second thing is there's an increase in conversions. We have close to a 80% conversion rate when it comes to monitoring folks who walk into our studios, right? So conversion rates, especially of consumers, especially in my category, given some consumers have a need for touch and feel, is something that, again, we monitor very closely, courtesy of the fact that we want to give consumers an overall omni-channel experience. So there's an average order value increase, there's a conversion rate increase, and then there is an increase in just the amount of data that you have, which you can, fundamentally create recommendations around, provide personal intervention-based selling to consumers on. So just the increase in data, which helps you build a far, I guess, robust, more informed, and a better business. And I think these are things which I, as a, let's say, as a marketplace owner, have been measuring ourselves on for quite some time, starting about 2015 when we first began our omni-channel efforts. And that's what I've been measuring on. And I think that works. It's average order values, so you get more of the customer's wallet. You convert more customers, so your conversions are higher. And you have a lot more data on the basis of which you can build a longer lifetime value and a longer lifetime engagement with the consumer. And I think that's how brands could. I'm not saying we are perfectly right. I'm just saying these are what we do. This is how brands could evaluate the success of their omni-channel strategies.
So Ravi, if I may add to Ambrish, I think the brand loyalty sales, that's another parameter, that's another metric. Are they loyal to you? And loyalty also comes with availability and convenience to shop and interact with the brand. And the other thing which we can also measure, which is the indirect benefit. So all sales channels, of course, as the name suggests, they are sales channels, but they are also visibility channels. So especially when you are available through a web store or through online, where the glance views are huge, conversions are low, but at least your brand is more visible. And when you're tracking your consumer, howsoever they are, they're consuming, whether they are on social media, whether they are consuming digital media or on OTT or visiting stores or say marketplaces, you are omnichannel and you are available everywhere. So you can be very visible and increase the brand recall and propensity to buy. So consideration, the journey of a consumer improves without actually investing in advertising, because these are genuinely the sales channels, but omnichannel also adds to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if I were to add as well, I mean, just taking our example, since we provide, an omni-channel play plus the individual choice for the brands to use whichever channel they want. So the comparative being a single channel, if you will, selling through either a social commerce or a conversational commerce versus an omni-channel route, you can immediately see that there's about a 45% difference in terms of the sales volume that a brand using omni-channel gets immediately off our platform. Versus a single channel as well. So clearly those metrics that we look at, and I think what Amrish alluded to, all of them sort of resonate quite clearly with somebody using an omni-channel play versus a single channel play. And I think at the end of the day, I think your marketing ROI, your customer loyalty obviously increases, which increases your LTV and then sort of drops your CAC as well. So I mean, it's like that magic pill that you take and everything is going to be all right. Is where I think the omni-channel play sort of comes in.
Yeah. So there's a very interesting way, Ravi, and you potentially would empathize with. There's a very interesting way of measuring the effectiveness of omni-channel by business categories, right? So suppose either you have a high frequency business where you don't need to be omni-channel, and potentially everything can happen just through distance selling. And so therefore your LTV CACs will always be upwards of 4 and your life will be great and so on. Or you have a lower frequency business where I think it's an absolute must to be omni-channel, because that's when you get your LTV CACs up to a 4+ range. I mean, so I think it's kind of predefined for the nature of business you're on, where omni-channel just is a choice that certain businesses have to make.
I think very, very compelling data points. I think these metrics really make the story come alive. And I think, one thing that you mentioned, Amrish, at the beginning of your answer, we used to be in an environment which was data scarce, right? I mean, it was very difficult to get data about, what channels, what are consumers doing. But, we are in a data-rich environment now. And so thank you for your answers. Very, very interesting. And at that, Seema, hi. I just noticed you joined the call. So great to have you on the call, Seema. We just started the conversation. So while we were waiting. So in some senses, I think, Amrish, maybe a quick follow-on question to you before we sort of move tracks. There is a lot of data technologies enabling it. We all, beyond the panel, a lot of us may have the right ideas. But how do we actually make a proposition, or how do we think about differentiating on consumer experience, right? A lot of the outcome metrics cannot really take shape unless the consumer experience is very differentiated, and you are winning. A lot of your competitors will also be actually then becoming omni-channel. So how does one think about consumer experience in this world, and how do you what are the opportunities to differentiate?
So I'll actually take a point out of the earlier answer, which is that I think we now live in a world which has a plethora of data, right? And I think that allows us to go way beyond just data analytics to glean consumer insight, right? And if you get good insight on your consumers, I think what omni-channel allows you to do, and perhaps that's the biggest benefit of it, is the fact that you can integrate your experience of the consumer across every single channel that you sell from. So I think that the key to delivering to a great omni-channel experience is fundamentally integration. Now, let me give some examples. I have always been told as an online guy that I should do nothing which prevents a consumer from completing a checkout process. Right now, every possible UI UX researcher in the online world will tell you that, hey, don't add anything extra. Once they're in the checkout process, let them just complete checkout. I actually do exactly the opposite. I, at that point in time, tell them, hey, you know what? There's a Pepperfry studio, which is 3 kilometers away from you. You know what? There is, you can go check this product out, XYZ. Because I know that there will be some people who might actually drop off at a payment gateway stage. They just haven't quite made up their mind. And if I get them to make up their mind through an integrated approach, saying that, look, I'm omni-channel. You can actually interact with my brand at another place, which is 3 kilometers away from you. My upside's fairly high. I mean, like I said, I can get 2.5x the average order value, right? Or my conversion rates might go up more. And because there's a personal touch involved in a Paperfy studio, potentially, I mean, the person becomes mine for life, right? So the customer becomes mine for life. So I think integration is the key to provide a great experience. I mean, I don't think we can hide. We can't say, we have a store, but, we're selling online, but you know what, we can't do this. That's no longer an option. And as long as you embrace integration, I think we will deliver a superlative consumer experience, right? And that's what we aspire for. Now, do we get it right all the time? I think one of the big things that allows us to get it right a lot of the time is the fact that our supply chain or our backend processes that serve both online components and Paperfy studio customers, etc., are exactly the same. So what that does is it provides you a foundation on which you can build your business, right? So I think of our business as a foundation, as the foundation, which is the supply chain. And on top of which, there are various methods of consumer interactions, all of which we have got to do. And we've got to integrate the consumer as we're doing them, integrate the experience of the consumer as we're doing them. And fortunately, the supply chain foundation allows us to deliver to the promises that we make. And that's the final piece. Don't go omni-channel if you can't keep the promises that you're making. I think that's key, right? Yeah.
All right, I'd like to bounce off Ambrish on this particular question, because I 100% agree with you about integration. I mean, I'm based in the GCC, and for us, we have our e-commerce platform that became massive during COVID. We invested all our energies into it, realizing that our 1,800, 2,000 brick and mortar stores were going to be shut down. But for us, funnily enough, if I can revert back to your earlier question, we saw that the AOV was actually higher online than it is offline. And we've also noticed that the average number of units is higher online than it is offline. So that was a surprise for me when you mentioned the reverse. Integration, honestly,
it's because I'm an online company to begin with, who turned omni-channel over a period of time. I think you might be.
That might explain it. We were brick and mortar all the way, and we just turned online. So for me, honestly, integration, like you said, is key. But for us, and I know it's a question that you have later, Ravi, but the role of our stores has become more like the dark stores or the showrooms, where people go touch and feel, and it's the place to do your delivery from, to do your returns to, etc. But they're no longer our initial touch point for the customer as it used to be. But having said that, we've also integrated lately, in the last 4 months, we've integrated our loyalty program, which we had never done. We've integrated it on our online platform, and we've seen an uptake of almost 5% of our customers who used to shop offline now shopping online. So, I'm getting great reverse kind of feedback from you guys, which is brilliant for us. And you're getting my inputs from GCC.
This is
yeah, Ravi, if I can take a minute. Yeah, so I think it may have to do with the product category both are dealing in. Yeah, so that could be one difference. But coming back to your question, what kind of experience you want to give to the consumer at various touch points? I think for that we have to keep in mind why the consumer is there, why the consumer has come to the store, or why the consumer is online, why the consumer is on your web store versus marketplace. So if you do not realize that, and you want to serve the same food to a person who's come to the Chinese restaurant and an Indian restaurant, will probably go wrong. So the point which I'm making is, while omni-channel is the thing to do, we still have to see the same consumer behaves very differently when they shop from different places. So when they are online, if you believe me, when they're online, the first filter used by them is discount. That's the first filter, because they're over there, they're looking for offers. They are not looking for something else. As compared to when they come to the store, they look for something else. They look for, they want to try it out. They want to get the demonstration done. They want to get the training on how to use the product. They want to get a really highly personalized service. So we'll have to differentiate their experience basis, the reason why they are on a marketplace versus in your store. For example, I'll just give you a twist on this because we are a direct selling company largely. And then we have gone into multi-channel and then the omni-channel. So my direct selling business works on very different parameters. It doesn't work on price. It doesn't work on anything else. It largely works on trust. It largely works on personalization. That's how, because, the way we are selling, that channel is different. So you have to see why the consumer is in a particular touch point. The same consumer may behave very differently. So that differentiation has to be there.
Actually, I think touching upon, some elements of what each of you said, sharing some experience. So there used to be historically, consumer segmentation. You think about psychographic or demographic dimensions and create segments and think about that, all consumers in this segment behave similarly. Now you actually do have some sort of a schizophrenia in consumers where they behave very differently in different contexts. So it's really, in this context, in this situation, in this touch point, this is the kind of behavior that you can expect, and so on and so forth. So very interesting. And I think, since we are talking about catchy phrases, what came to my mind was the battle used to be at the front line, right? For most of the firms, for retailers, for brands. But now I think the battle is in the front line, but war is at the back end, right? Whether it's supply chain, whether it's data, whether it's technology, how do you actually set up the operating model, ways of working? And you can win the battle, but you can't lose the war if you don't fix the back end and how you sort of structure the organization. So very interesting. Thank you for your answers. Seema, now maybe I can just pull on the thread that you started to talk about, the role of the store. I mean, you obviously have a very widespread physical network of stores that across the countries that in your organization you've been running. Now, with COVID and the last 2 years, of course, like you mentioned, there's been a fair bit of transformation, accelerated transformation in some senses. And you yourself mentioned that the stores are more like dark stores now. They're experience centers. They're not, sales channels anymore. And if you were to measure them only with the sales throughput, they probably may not make sense anymore. But how do you see that changing going forward, right? The omnichannel trend, as most people believe, is an irreversible trend. It is here to stay. It will only get accelerated, presumably. But how do you think it has changed, and how do you see it moving forward?
So honestly speaking, if I can relate it with what Deepak was saying, you will always have those set of traditional buyers, depending also again in the segment of industry that you're in, but those traditional buyers will refuse to be omni-channel or even online. For them, it's just overwhelming. They want to be able to walk into a store, touch what they're buying and buy it. Tangibility is a huge issue for them. I think the millennials, and like you said, Deepak, if you're catering in your segment to millennials, there is no escaping omni-channel. I mean, there is no escaping the whole online version. They're not interested anymore to waste time going, I'm talking about GCC, where the malls are like, God knows how many millions of square feet. You don't want to walk the whole mall to pick up that one pair of shoe. It's easier to just do click and collect. It's easier to just, like I said, scout out what you need. In fact, funnily enough, in the GCC, we have data proven that even before COVID, 50% of the decisions to buy something were being made online. Only execution was being carried out offline. And that was obviously because we probably weren't doing enough to popularize the e-commerce platforms that we have access to. So I think going forward, I would highly recommend at least or insist that companies that are like ours, that sell fashion, food, etc., there is no escaping the omni-channel version. But funnily enough, having said that, Ravi, I must tell you, as a company, it's the first time in our history of over a quarter of a century that we've actually opened a homegrown social commerce platform, which is, like Sephora, like Nykaa. It's a beauty platform. And it's the first time that we're actually doing something online before we go offline with it. Yes, we're going to collect the consumer insights. We're going to collect the necessary data to then help us open the brick and mortar stores, which is our forte. So to me, I like I said, the role is changing. But for us as a traditional brick and mortar company, if I may add as a last point, it was a huge mindset shift. because our employees, our frontline workers are so used to getting incentives and bonuses on what they were selling that when they saw a parcel going from their store that they hadn't had a hand in selling it to a customer, it affected their morale. So we actually had to come up with new reward schemes, new incentive schemes that incorporated that aspect, whereby the frontline worker actually felt empowered to let a sale go from the store physically to the online platform. So just wanted to share that.
I think there are some other examples of, I think reading what Seema said, basically the BOPIS or the buy online, pick up in store concept obviously has also helped in terms of funds, obviously driving footfalls, getting better discounts. I'm quite intrigued also, Amrish's contrarian view of, putting something in before the checkout happens is like anathema to most people to say that get to a store. But I guess that obviously that insight that you probably have garnered through that route and getting better conversions probably, obviously plays its advantages of doing that. And I think that whole dark store, so where we are experimenting is doing some buy online, pick up in store concepts for brands to do that so that you're able to then also drive footfall at the end of the day for some categories which require a little bit of touch and feel. And if people have not experienced the product, then obviously having that experiential play would sort of make it a lot more easier. And return shipments, cost of those elements of that transaction flow sort of get managed as well without having to sort of expense it out.
So Ravi, what is also happening is, it's online discovery, offline checkout. Checkout in the sense checking the products and buying online again. So that's also we may call it showrooming because if it is not size agnostic, if it is to do with the fit or touch and feel, you would still like to go to a store, but may still again go and buy online. Yeah, so that's very predominantly things which are happening, and we are not very equipped as retailers yet. In other parts of the world, if you show it is cheaper than what you are selling, the retailer matches the price, not to lose the customer. So I think we'll just have to keep in mind. But maybe my personal view is physical retail in a country like India is a long game. It's not going to go anywhere, not at all. The only thing is you will have some share which is going to online, whether through your own web store or marketplace, but it can never become that 50%. Even the evolved economies, and if it is not books, music, or mobile, which is standard product, they haven't gone beyond 15%. So I think the importance of store, which you were asking, is there, and especially it is very, very important if you are a premium or a luxury brand. Then it becomes so important. And also not to forget, we'll really have to have a good balance between all the channels when we go to Omni, because if it is related to the size and the fit, I can tell you, Seema can second me on this. If you're selling footwear, 30% of them come back. 30% is the return, and 30% return in the sense reverse logistics included. You have lost a month in the whole transaction when the inventory is not available. So I think the solution lies in a combination of it, and it depends on what you are selling, whether size agnostic or does it has to do with the fit. Yeah.
Ravi, my 2 cents would be, I actually think that there's an opportunity here to think retail and omni-channel retail very differently from how it's been thought earlier. If you start thinking infinite catalogs rather than products in store, I think the way you would approach the problem is very differently from how a classical retailer is today approaching the problem, right? And I know it's a big ask, but it's COVID has already turned our world upside down. Let's take another opportunity and completely disrupt ourselves, right? And I think that's the opportunity we should play to. So if the concept of the infinite catalog comes into play, right, then I think we're talking an omni-channel experience which is truly omni-channel. Everything's virtual, whether the presence is, whether the interaction with the consumers in the physical world or is it in the virtual world, but everything then is virtual. So it's a radical way of thinking about it, but it's an opportunity that's presenting itself to us, I think, and depends on what we make out of it.
True, Amrish. Just to catch on what you just said, what's happening today, if you were to go back 5 years and think forward and say, this would happen 5 years out, everyone would think that's radical, right? So it doesn't take long for the world to change. I think Deepak, what you mentioned about the non-linear consumer journeys, I think that's super important. But the one critical part of that non-linearity is that there are parts of the journey which are physical, right? So and I think that's the part one should not forget. I think Anurag, some of your experiments on the buy online pickup store, I think that's one thing that's at least blindingly refreshing for me in the last few years when I've been seeing the revolution, is that the pace of experiments and innovation, and the fact that you can actually measure the outcomes of those experiments. So win scale cycles have become shorter and the impact greater. So all the best on your experiments. And Seema, I think the point you made about the role of the store, I think summarizing everything that I've heard so far, the store is not going anywhere, but the role is definitely changing, right? It is a very different role, and that has an implication on incentives, on processes, on how you design training, ways of working, is that an experience center? Is that a sales channel? Is that a combination of both? What's the right balance? How do you merchandise? How do you price? Are the products different? I think just the world of number of variables has to think through, I think is mind-boggling, but I think quite exciting as well.
So Ravi, I just want to share with you, we have a brand, a Polish brand called CCC. And it's very strange for us, but they almost are ahead of the times. And 3 years ago, they showed us one of their flagship stores where there was no merchandise on the floor. You went in, you had an iPad, you checked what you liked, you decided which ones you wanted to see, and the guy brought them out to you. So there was already this concept of you don't need to scour through aisles and aisles and aisles of stuff. You just tell us what you want, you look, you filter the search, etc. So I'm just saying that, like one of you mentioned, Europe or even the US is far ahead of us in terms of online shopping, etc. We're still sitting at double digits, but very low double digits, at least for us in the GCC.
Ravi, as you said, in addition to that, you will have to see which format now. The retail formats will change. Either it has to be very small or it has to be very large. Very large is for giving the experience for people taking the pain to come. Small is just as Seema said, just have a look, order it, we'll deliver home. So formats also have to change.
That's a very interesting point, Deepak. Absolutely. The conventional formats with the end caps, side caps, that's perhaps somewhat history. But I think we had the last 5 minutes. This has been an exceptionally interesting and engaging discussion, with this group. Maybe what I'll request each of you in your own words, spend a minute. What are the top 2 takeaways, learnings, from the challenges or your journeys that you have that you'd like to share with whosoever's listening in? I'm sure it'll be very valuable to the audience.
Yeah. So Ravi, I think one of the other points as well is, right, one is sometimes there is a little bit of a confusion between online and omni-channel. And while that sort of depends on where the journey starts from, and then there's the whole concept of D2C, right? And I think sometimes brands make the mistake that D2C becomes a channel, but actually D2C is, in my opinion, not a channel, but a mindset, right? So it's about you being direct to customer. And the way I sort of define that is that while D2C will boost revenues, getting insights and learnings from all channels obviously makes that difference. So the way I look at it is D2C is a two-way dialogue with the customer, but omnichannel is a two-way dialogue with the customer in a 360-degree manner, right? So that sort of drives that storyline for the whole element of it, because a lot of brands are saying I'm D2C, and that start to think of that as a channel rather than a mindset that I have to be direct to customer with all channels in play, right? And I think so that's the sort of thought I want to leave the audience with, that think of it as a mindset and not a channel.
So Ravi, if I can go next, while we have spoken about the benefits of omnichannel, we haven't touched upon what are the challenges. So in addition to the tech, which becomes somewhere constrained, and the mindset of your franchisees or your stakeholders. I think there are two things which are majorly holding it for many brands to join the bandwagon. One is the price parity. If you want to talk about omni-channel, you have to have the same price across everywhere, which is not the case today. Which absolutely not the case today. Stores are having their own promotions. Online is having their different promotions. Your web store is working in a very different direction. So if you do not have the same price across any channel, you cannot execute a true omni-channel. Somebody has bought from somewhere, they have to return somewhere. The price there is different. How will you manage? So if you cannot, and it's the biggest problem, I don't know how to solve, but all of us are facing this. So that is one. If you can't have the same price, omni-channel, you will struggle big time. And the second thing is the value chains. Every channel has a very different value chain. So the cost of sales in every channel is very different. It should not happen that you move from one channel, which is highly profitable and giving you better returns, to and cannibalize with a channel which is giving you low return at a higher cost. Then your business may remain same or may improve by 5-10%. Your bottom line is gone for a toss. So I think these are two things we really have to keep in mind. But if I have to pick one, if you can't bring price parity across wherever you are available, through whomsoever you are available, under your control, not under your control, franchises or Amazon or whatever, if the price is different, you will always struggle to execute omnichannel. Or even if you execute, you will give such a bad experience to your consumer. Because if they bought from your store, in 10 minutes, her daughter or her son saw on online at 40%, you're talking omni, you're gone for a toss. So these two challenges are real, and there's a struggle currently.
So I'll go next, since Ambrish looks like the guy who wants to have the last word.
I'm just
That's fine. It's okay. So look, for us, I think we've had three absolutely major learnings. I think our first one was that the customer online didn't trust us because they had our online platform has no correlation in terms of name, etc., to our stores, because we have 75 brands. We couldn't obviously put all 75 brands as names, so we had a different name for it, and they just didn't relate. So it took us a while to realize that as soon as we integrated our loyalty program onto it, which is actually a cardless reward system, it's on your mobile, that suddenly then dropped the penny for them, and they realized, yes, this site is authentic, everything being sold there is authentic. So for us, trust was a major thing. And also when we made our click and collect possible, they realized, yes, okay, we have access to 1,800 stores with these 75 brands that we can use. The second thing for us was, as Ambrish was mentioning, that if you don't get your delivery right or your supply chain right, we took up our own last mile. Having taken that up completely was a game changer for us, because before that we were relying on different people, different vendors, different things, and it was screwing our reputation up royally. I don't know if I'm allowed to say screwing. Third thing was, the biggest learning for us was mindset. This mindset shift, I mean, doing workshops with not just the frontline, but even, our other sort of support functions, to make them understand that this is here to stay. This is not something we're just playing with and might not, sustain over a period of time. This is very much here to stay, and this is what business is going to be like. It took a lot. It took a lot to train everyone digitally so that they don't suddenly feel overwhelmed or alienated on it. So yeah, for us, it was trust, last mile, and the mindset. Ambrish, you're on.
Thank you very much, Seema. And I request Ravi to say something after me so that I'm not the last guy. But here's the thing, right? If there's one thing I'd bet on, it would be technology, I guess. And I guess those are our roots. So, 5 years back when we ventured into omnichannel and started thinking of ourselves as an omnichannel company, we figured out as to how is it that we can use tech to provide an experience through omnichannel studios, which is just as good as the online experience that they would get, right? And now, 5 years hence, I mean, here's the challenge that we are laying out for ourselves. How do we blur the lines between online and offline? And that's the challenge that we are building to. So, for example, if I'm able to, on a mobile phone, have a consumer see a table tap the screen and get a haptic feedback, which is just like how that table would be, and the sounds exactly like what the table would be, then I think we're done, right? So if there's one thing that I would say is still to change the game, it's technology and how it will blur the lines between online and offline. And that for me would be the big bet, the moonshot, the what have you, for at least us as a company.
Yeah. And before Ravi jumps in, I think tech can be the only enabler for omnichannel, actually. So there's otherwise you can't get that going with the integrations and the experience both rolled into one.
So I'm going to jump in with one last thing, adding to Ambrish's point about tech. When I first saw the Charlotte Tilbury store in London, and they had that AR mirror where you walked up to it and you chose the look and it happened. And it happened on your face. It happened on my dad's face. He was quite disgusted. But what I'm saying is that I think AR is going to change our lives. And it's not just AR, I think, anymore online. It's also AR offline. It's also AR in our stores, in the mirrors, where you just hold up an outfit and it shows you how it looks on you. So I think, yeah, definitely tech is the #2 game changer in this entire ball.
Absolutely. I think I was waiting for Deepak to say the last step in. I think, absolutely everything that I heard in the last 5 minutes, and not to say that the previous 50 minutes before that were not resonating, but, I think the last 5 minutes, absolutely each one of them, as I think about the clients that I work with, it's each of them are important. And I think if I reflect on, the choices, as people who are running the business, it's not easy. You have to make sure you have to think about what's your priority for the month in some senses, what do you fix, and how do you actually make sure that all of these changes are happening at the same time, right? How do you fix the pricing while upgrading your technology? And Seema, like you said, it's not anymore about using data well. It's actually about building on top of what the data you have. AR is there, recommendations is a big part of actually increasing your AOV frequency with consumers and so on. AI will come in at some point of time, in some categories at least. So it is a fast changing sort of, in some senses, ecosystem within your organization. And then the consumers themselves are not lazy. They are changing fast as well. So very interesting times. Thank you so much. We're on time. Anurag, Amrish, Deepak, and Seema, thank you so much for making the time and engaging in this very interesting discussion. Very useful for me, and I hope the audience loved it too. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe. Bye.
Thanks. You're an awesome moderator. Cheers.
Thanks.